the Undersecretary General and High Representative for the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, excellencies and distinguished delegates, heads of the United Nations system and other international organizations, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to warmly welcome you all to this annual ministerial meeting of foreign ministers of landlocked developing countries. I must say I am encouraged by your attendance despite your busy schedules. We are meeting today under very unusual and challenging circumstances due to the COVID-19. Our countries have been particularly hard and need collective action and international support to overcome this crisis. The theme of our meeting is partnering for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and achieving sustainable development in LLDC in the COVID-19 era. Let's now proceed to the adoption of the agenda of the meeting. The provisional agenda was circulated to you in advance. Does anyone have any objections? I see no. The agenda is adopted. Let me start our business. We will proceed to start our meeting with agenda item 1, the opening session. Allow me to begin by presenting opening remarks in my capacity as the representative of Kazakhstan. Distinguished participants, it's a great honor for me to chair today's annual ministerial meeting of LLDC. At the outset, on behalf of the LLDCs and on my own behalf, I would like to express our gratitude to the Secretary General for attending our meeting. Your presence demonstrates the continued commitment of the UN system to the LLDCs. Our appreciations also goes to His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkir from brotherly Turkey for his presence in our meeting. Let me also take this opportunity to recognize the Undersecretary General Utoy Kamano and her team at the OHR LLS for their continued support and enduring work for the benefits of the LLDCs. Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, last year under esteemed chairmanship of Paraguay, we held the midterm review of the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. While we have collectively made substantial progress, the midterm review revealed that not enough has been made to reach all objectives of the VPOA by 2024. The theme of this year's meeting aims to continue on from the momentum of the midterm review focused on the partnering for accelerated implementation of the Plan of Action and achieving sustainable development of NLDC in the area of COVID-19. The impacts of COVID-19 threaten to reverse the hard-won gains made by LLDCs. The current crisis constrained the already tight financial and fiscal space in LLDCs, with commodity prices collapsing, while ODA and foreign direct investment flows to LLDCs continuing to decline. Without adequate financial assistance, LLDCs risk being left behind. My president underscored this on 28th of May, speaking on behalf of our group at the high-level meeting on financing for development. Excellencies, distinguished participants, as the chair of the group of LLDCs, Kazakhstan has actively engaged during relevant processes throughout this year, such as the high-level political forum on sustainable development, the financing for development discussions, and others. As we promised at the beginning of our chairmanship, we raised awareness about the group's issues, delivering 26 statements and holding numerous meetings in and outside UN on behalf of our group. In this capacity, Kazakhstan will continue to advocate for the interest of our countries in all relevant international fora. This year, we are at crucial juncture as we have now embarked on the second phase of implementing the Vienna Programme and of the Decade of Action for the SDGs. The effective implementation of VPOA is critical to the achievement of the SDGs. In this regard, we have initiated the development of the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA in its remaining 5 years. I want to thank all the members of the group for their firm endorsement of this idea. I once again express my profound gratitude to the Secretary General for the establishment of this initiative, as well as to Undersecretary General Utoy Kamano and her able team for the coordination and elaboration of the roadmap that will be adopted today. I also thank all UN and international agencies who actively engaged in the process. I am confident that the roadmap will help to join efforts of the UN agencies and international organizations, transit countries, development partners, private sector, and other interested stakeholders. We need to break the silos and avoid duplication of the functions to ensure better practical results on the ground. To conclude, we must remember that strength is in unity, and we must continue to act collectively to garner greater international support for our efforts to achieve sustainable development and to build back better in these difficult times. As the chair of this group, Kazakhstan will continue its dedicated work to achieve these goals. And thank you for your attention. I resume my function as a chair. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkir, the President of the 75th session of the United Nations General Assembly. Please.
His Excellency Mr. Muhtar Tiluberdi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Global Chair of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries, His Excellency Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Excellencies, 2 days ago, I presided over the high-level meeting commemorating the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. While I took a moment to reflect on the UN's successes and challenges, I also looked ahead. I noted then that we must support the United Nations to evolve into a more agile, effective, and accountable organization, so it is fit for purpose and can deliver the future we want. I would echo that call here today. While no country in the world has escaped the struggles associated with COVID-19, those faced by LLDCs are particularly severe. Limited access to ports hinders shipments of crucial medical supplies and pharmaceuticals, and already weak exports are being further strained. Unfortunately, as is so often the case, the most vulnerable are being hit hardest. COVID-19 represents the greatest global challenge since the end of the Second World War and will require global cooperation at greater levels than ever before. Failure to act swiftly will only entrench and widen existing inequalities and take us even further from achieving the SDGs. Immediate support is required to fulfill the reform agenda and ensure that the UN is fit for purpose. We must also strive to ensure meaningful progress against the Paris Agreement, the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, the Sendai Framework on Disaster Risk Reduction, Almaty and Vienna Programs of Action, and the UN Convention to combat desertification. And we must re-energize our efforts to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals through the Decade of Action. On this last point, the SDGs have the potential to serve as a blueprint for resilient recovery from COVID-19. In doing so, it is essential that the international community consider and account for the contextual circumstances of the LLDCs. Measures must be taken to facilitate their participation in the global sustainable recovery. Each country has its own path to sustainable development, guided by the goals. But each country's conditions and contexts differ. We cannot copy and paste the solution. We must work together with flexibility and adaptability to achieve success. For LLDCs, this means strengthening technical capacity building, facilitating access to financial resources, enhancing technological capacity building, and improving access to markets. As President of the General Assembly, I will promote the use of emerging technologies, strengthening data, and results-oriented action. You can also count on my presidency to extend full support to the implementation of the roadmap on accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. And I will work to finalize the modalities of the high-level midterm review of the decade for action on water and the high-level meeting on the water-related goals of the SDGs, both of which are critical to the LLDCs. Excellencies, I appreciate again the opportunity to address this forum. Trust that I will work with you to advance the objectives of the LLDCs, and that I will remain a champion of those most vulnerable. Thank you very much.
I thank His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır for his statement. I shall now pass the floor to His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, United Nations Secretary General.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I'm pleased to be with you, a group of countries that share many common challenges linked to similar geographic circumstances and opportunities. The impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is exacerbating the plight of landlocked developing countries. Trade, transport, and distribution have been upended. Exports and imports have been affected by problems at borders, lockdowns, trade restrictions, disruptions in global supply chains, and commodity price shocks. And the risk of debt distress looms. I know how deeply these new challenges are affecting you, threatening economic growth, jobs, livelihoods, and ultimately the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development and the Paris Agreement on climate change. The United Nations and I are here to partner with you on solutions. We want to continue working with you to pursue new technologies for low-emission, safe means of transport and infrastructure during this challenging time. We want to work with you to mobilize private and public funding to unlock and scale up solutions. And we want to support your transition from dependence on economically volatile fossil fuels to renewable energy systems. As we embark on a decade of action to deliver the Sustainable Development Goals and strive to recover better from the pandemic, we must keep our focus on stopping the pandemic. The availability of future vaccines to all developing countries, including the landlocked developing countries, is fundamental to any sustainable global recovery. We must ensure that the Vienna Programme of Action and all of the global agendas of which we agreed, from Addis Ababa to Paris to the 2030 Agenda, are at the core of recovery. We must also protect against defaults and debt crises. In many heavily indebted countries, economies are suffering greatly from acute unemployment, the drop-off of tourism and remittances. With the impact of COVID-19, global debt has soared to unprecedented heights. In some of the most vulnerable countries, more than a quarter of public revenue is being used to service public debt, severely limiting fiscal space. We need to ensure that resources and debt relief reach all countries that need it, in order to create space for investments in recovery and the Sustainable Development Goals. Combating illicit financial flows is also necessary to ensure that resources are channeled where they are needed most. Next Tuesday's meeting of leaders on financing for development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond can help galvanize ambition and action in these areas. As we look to the crucial period ahead, we must also increase the trade potential of LLDCs. Invest in transport infrastructure is crucial. Other key enablers include digital technology and regional integration, including through better cooperation within landlocked, developing and transit countries. The new roadmap for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action over the next 5 years can provide further guidance and momentum. Once it is adopted by the ministers, the Office of the High Representative and the UN system are committed to fully support its implementation. We'll also continue to strengthen the capacities of the High Representative for least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states. Finally, climate action is essential in your COVID-19 response and recovery, especially in creating green jobs and aligning national plans and budgets with the SDGs and the Paris Agreement to help drive recovery towards a resilient and sustainable future. I ask all landlocked developing countries to implement the 6 principles I've set out for a climate-positive recovery. Invest in green jobs and sectors, don't bail out polluting industries, end fossil fuel subsidies, take climate risks and opportunities in all policy and financial decisions, and work together, leaving no one behind. Excellencies, as the United Nations marks its 75th anniversary, we are determined to meet the test of this pivotal moment, including some reforms of the UN development system. The United Nations system will continue to support you in your efforts to realize sustainable, inclusive development for your people as you respond and ultimately recover from the COVID-19 crisis. And I thank you.
I thank Mr. Secretary General for his remarks. We have come to the end of the opening session. Let me note that the President of the General Assembly and the Secretary General will not be staying throughout the duration of the meeting as they have other engagements to attend this morning. Let me take this opportunity to thank them profoundly for taking time in their busy schedules to be with us this morning. It's a clear indication of their commitments and solidarity in addressing the LLDCs issues. And thank you. We shall now proceed to agenda item 2, and we'll hear remarks by Madame Utoy Kamano, the Under-Secretary General and the High Representative of LLDCs and SEEDs. She will give overview of progress in implementing the Vienna Programme of Action for LLDCs and impact of COVID-19. You have the floor, Madam Under-Secretary. Are you with us, Madam Utoy Kamano? We don't hear you. Madam, please unmute your microphone. We cannot hear you. We still cannot hear the speaker. Probably there are some technical difficulties in the office.
While we're waiting for
No. It seems that we are having some connection difficulties while we are waiting for reconnection with Madame Utoy Kamano. Allow me go over the few housekeeping points. Speakers will be given the floor as per the list of speakers, which is part of the annotated agenda. When chairman gives you the floor and allows you streaming, select the video option in order to stream both your audio and video. After your intervention, click the red disconnect button to stop your streaming. If you have any question or face technical difficulties, please reach out to our experts who are marked as a moderator or host in the list of participants. Please click on the arrow mark next to their names to send text message. You can also write on the chat box. To request the floor, click the green raise your hand icon. After finishing, please lower your hand. As we are constrained to end the meeting by 11 a.m., I am asking for your understanding. Interpretation will be provided in English, French, Russian, and Spanish. You may select interpretation language in the top left-hand side corner of the screen. Is Madame Otoikamano with us? Please, Madam, can you unmute your microphone? Yes, excellent.
Can you hear me?
Yes, yes, we are
Okay,
hearing you. Thank you.
Your Excellency, Mr. Mukhtar Chowbedi, Minister of Foreign Affairs for Kazakhstan and Global Chair of the Group of LLDCs, Honorable Ministers, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, heads of UN agencies, international and regional organizations, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Firstly, thank you, Your Excellency Chowbedi, for inviting me to this meeting. I also wish to express my appreciation for Kazakhstan's leadership and commitment to the work of the group of LLDCs. The theme of partnering for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and achieving sustainable development in LLDCs in the era of COVID-19 is timely and relevant. Few of us reckoned last year with how 2020 would unfold. The midterm review held in December 2019 had already called for accelerated implementation of the VPOA in its remaining 5 years. With the manifold, many not even known and still continuing COVID-19 pandemic impacts, we must more than ever come together to find innovative strategies to achieve this mandate and the SDGs in LLDCs. Excellencies, LLDCs make efforts to address their development challenges, but they remain behind in achieving the SDGs and the objectives of the Vienna Programme of Action. Progress has been realized in some SDGs and VPOA targets. Overall, LLDCs lag behind the averages of all the developing countries and of the world on many socio-economic development indicators. LLDC's average growth in real per capita GDP declined from 2.3% in 2018 to 1.4% in 2019. The unemployment rate stood at an average of 4.5% in 2019. Youth and women are disproportionately affected. Food insecurity indicators continue to exhibit deteriorating trends. Between 2015 to 2018, we saw a quite modest decline of about 3 percentage points in the population living below the international poverty line of US $1.90. Such health-related indicators as maternal, under 5 and infant mortality to HIV incidence and vaccinations also recorded a modest progress. Now COVID-19 threatens to reverse this very limited progress. We all know of the high vulnerability of LLDCs to the negative impacts of climate change, especially drought, desertification, land degradation, and the melting of glaciers. This continues to be of serious concern. Land covered by forests has declined from 17.2% in 2015 to 16.8% in 2020. LLDCs and their transit neighbours continue to make efforts to implement the much-needed regional and sub-regional initiatives to facilitate transit. The COVID-19 pandemic threatens to also reverse progress in this area. Countries continue to impose border restrictions in their efforts to combat the spread of the virus. LLDC's share of global merchandise trade remained low at about 1% in 2019. The export continued to be concentrated on very few products, with 26 of the LLDCs dependent on primary commodities for more than 60% of their exports. The impact of COVID-19 on the commodities market, and thus the commodity-dependent countries, accelerates the looming LLDC debt crisis. 13 LLDCs are already classified as high-indebted poor countries. In some countries, the level of external debt exceeds gross national income. Very little progress has been achieved in much-needed structural economic transformation. LLDC share of manufacturing value added in GDP stagnated at about 10% in 2019. The share of services value added in GDP declined from 47.3% in 2017 to 46.6% in 2019. This limited diversification of economic activity leaves LLDCs more vulnerable than ever to new shocks and disruptions, including COVID-19. Many times we have recalled that we must address the high trade costs faced by LLDCs. It is encouraging that all LLDCs that are WTO members have ratified the WTO Trade Facilitation Agreement. Implementation, however, remains slow at about 35%. This limited and slow progress is now threatened by the introduction of measures aimed to curb the spread of COVID-19. Enhanced support is needed to build the capacity of the LLDCs and transit developing countries to implement initiatives aimed at facilitating trade. Achieving an enabling environment for private sector development remains a challenge in many LLDCs. Almost a third of LLDCs ranked in the bottom quarter of ease of doing business, according to the 2020 edition of the World Bank's Doing Business. On infrastructure development, LLDCs have made progress in expanding their road and rail works. This, of course, is costly, and it takes time and challenges, including missing links, operational limitations, and limited funding. Regarding energy, in 2018, the average proportion of population with access to electricity in LLDCs increased from 56.3% in 2017 to 58.7%. Yet LLDCs still lag behind the world average of 89.6%, and there is still a wide rural-urban gap. On ICT, the proportion of individuals using internet was estimated to be 25.3% in 2018, which is way below the world average of 51.4%. The high cost for broadband continues to be a challenge. Digital connectivity has proven to be indispensable during the time of COVID-19, and therefore investments and support are urgently needed to reduce the digital divide. To sum it up now, it is now that the LLDCs need enhanced support to achieve the Vienna Programme of Action objectives and the SDG. It is thus of great concern that ODA to LLDCs continue to decline. In 2018, ODA to LLDCs decreased from 29.2 billion in 2017 to 28 billion in 2018. Also, ODA remains concentrated in a few LLDCs. FDI flows also declined and are concentrated on few LLDCs and their extractive sectors. Excellencies, it's now that faster enhanced multilateral effort and greater cooperation at regional and sub-regional levels are needed. To play their part, 40 United Nations system agencies and relevant international and regional organizations contributed to the development of the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action at the request of the chair of the LLDCs. This is a sign of the strong and lasting commitment of the United Nations system and other international and regional organizations to support the implementation of the VPOA and help address the challenges of the LLDCs. OHR LLS not only facilitated the development of the roadmap, but continues to provide substantive support, including advocacy for enhanced support to LLDCs. We stepped up all these efforts in the light of the devastating impact of COVID-19. OHR LLS organized several events. The topics pertain to addressing sovereign debt distress, food security, universal access to resilient connectivity. OHR LLS, in collaboration with WCO, issued a joint statement calling for trade and transit facilitation to and from LLDCs during the pandemic. OHR LLS, UNCTAD, UNECA, UNECE, UNECLAC, and UNESCAP issued a joint call for smooth transit and transport facilitation to and from LLDCs. OHR LLS also published a report on effective transit transport corridor development and management report on best practices. The role of LLDCs is fundamental to achieving full implementation in the Vienna Programme of Action. Once more, I call on the LLDCs to redouble domestic efforts to implement the VPOA, including by mainstreaming its priorities into national development strategies and sectoral plans. The support of the United Nations resident coordinators is fundamental in this regard. Excellencies, the COVID-19 pandemic has exposed the great divide of our times, inequality, and so many other vulnerabilities. It has deepened existing vulnerabilities. The LLDCs are no exception to this. The LLDCs need faster, deeper, and greater cooperation at all levels to address COVID-19 and mitigate its impact. There's a need for LLDCs in transit countries to enhance cross-border collaboration. They must ensure coordinated interventions between national border agencies. Facilitating the smooth movement of goods and keeping borders open for trade is fundamental. In this regard, it is important for governments and organizations in the region to collaborate to keep cross-border transport corridors and regional transport networks open while protecting public health. Governments around the globe must go beyond just minimizing disruptions to international transport. We must view the crisis as an opportunity to reorient international freight transport operations towards a more sustainable path. Strengthening regional cooperation between LLDCs and transit countries, in particular on transit and transport along important corridors, and promoting public and private partnerships is now more critical than ever. We all must come together and strengthen multilateral capacity to provide dedicated support to what is the most vulnerable group of countries and people. Once again, I assure you that OHR LLS will continue to advocate for enhanced support to the LLDCs, especially during these challenging times. We are in this together, and it is indeed only together that we can lay the foundations for the future people want. I thank you.
And I thank Madam Utrikamano for her remarks. We now move to the agenda item 3. I'll give the floor to Honorable Ministers of LLDCs, transit countries, development partners, and heads of international organizations, according to the list of inscribed speakers. I wish to remind all speakers to limit their statements to no more than 3 minutes due to time constraints. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Antonio Rivas Palacios, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Paraguay. Please, Your Excellency.
Muy buenos días, señor Ministro de Asuntos Exteriores de Kazajistán, señor Presidente de la Asamblea General, señor Secretario General, señora Alta Representante, ministros y delegados. Agradezco a Kazajistán por liderar a nuestro grupo en esta difícil coyuntura. La pandemia de la COVID-19 ha afectado a todos los países y los países en desarrollo sin litoral.
Developing countries, landlocked developing countries, are suffering in a very cruel way from the health crisis. Measures such as closing borders and restrictions on the circulation of goods and people can have very serious impacts on sustainable development and growth. This is why international cooperation is more necessary than ever today, in particular for transit countries and our partners on the international scene. I'd like to underscore the importance of digital solutions to preserve the dynamism of our economies. We would launch an appeal for measures adopted to combat the virus to be reasonable, to be adopted at the right time. I am thinking here about medical equipment in particular, and they should reach countries. The pandemic cannot serve as an excuse to exclude landlocked developing countries from access to global markets and the benefits of international trade. In this regard, we agree with initiatives to finance the Sustainable Development Goals and to facilitate trade are essential. Mr. President, landlocked developing countries are confronted with particular difficulties, whether we're talking about import or export. We see that there is an increase of 20 to 60% transit countries, reducing our negotiation capacity on other matters. The security of our internet connection and the sustainability of it is something that is affected by our geographical position, and we are in a disadvantaged position due to our geographical position vis-a-vis the health crisis. Because of this, we need to step up our efforts to effectively implement the Vienna Programme of Action. There are transit countries here that need to assist us. We really approve the roadmap presented by Kazakhstan here, and we are convinced that the roadmap will be extremely useful. Paraguay would like to reiterate its commitment to multilateralism and international law to promote a fairer, a more prosperous world, a world in which no country is left behind. Thank you very much.
I thank Minister for his intervention. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Chingiz Aidarbekov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kyrgyzstan, who will deliver a pre-recorded message.
Distinguished Chair of the Group, distinguished participants, colleagues, allow me to express my gratitude to Kazakhstan for convening this meeting and for its active work as the Chair of the Landlocked Developing Countries Group. Kyrgyzstan has been actively supporting and implementing the key points of the Vienna Programme of Action, which is an important part of the Sustainable Development Agenda. Since the midterm review of the Vienna Programme of Action was adopted in December 2019, we have conducted significant work at the national level. For example, the Kyrgyz Republic is continuing to implement its National Development Strategy 2040 and its Export Development Programme 2022. As part of the Year for Developing Regions, Digitalization and Support for Children, work is underway to develop export potential in the Kyrgyz Republic's regions. In addition to this, the Kyrgyz Republic is also cooperating actively with UN programs and agencies, as well as international and regional organizations. Distinguished participants, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown how important transport and transit corridors are. They connect our economies and support the development of our states. This issue is particularly relevant for Central Asia, whose countries are predominantly far from the main seaports. We have seen how complicated it has been to deliver medication and assist the return home of our citizens abroad. The pandemic and its economic impact has also highlighted the importance of supporting trade, economic cooperation, and ensuring that freight transit is unimpeded. We believe that restrictions due to the pandemic should not turn into economic isolation. There is a need to strive even more to minimise barriers and strengthen transit capacity. Kyrgyzstan, like the rest of the world, is continuing to combat the pandemic. The pandemic has caused a decrease in economic development indicators and mutual trade, and has disrupted demand and supply chains and increased budget deficits and unemployment. In this regard, we believe that, given the circumstances, there is a need to pay particular attention to debt relief. In this context, we welcome the G20 debt moratorium for developing countries. I would also like to mention the high-level meeting on financing for development in the era of COVID-19 and beyond, which took place on the 28th of May 2020. During this event, the President of Kyrgyzstan, President Zenbekov, noted the importance of a root and branch restructuring of foreign debt and the importance of a broad application of debt swaps for sustainable development projects. It is our belief that this approach will create the right conditions for a more sustainable recovery. Distinguished participants, we trust that the outcome of today's meeting will highlight new ways of implementing the Sustainable Development Goals for landlocked developing countries and will give new impetus to development cooperation. I wish all of today's participants a very successful meeting and fruitful discussions. Thank you.
I thank Minister for his intervention, and now we have pre-recorded message of His Excellency Mr. Rasmus Prehn, Minister for Development Cooperation of Denmark.
Crisis is the biggest global challenge the world is facing in modern times. The landlocked developing countries are among the most vulnerable when global crises hit. The COVID-19 crisis is no exemption. For Denmark, there is no choice. We must help, we must act, and we do act. As soon as the crisis hit, I set aside 1 billion Danish kroner to address the health and socio-economic impacts of COVID-19 in developing countries. The COVID-19 crisis has come on top of the existing and well-known global challenges. We are not on track to meet the Paris target of limiting global temperature increase to 1.5 degrees. We are not on track to meet the SDGs. COVID-19 has not made it easier to reach the goals. We must see the crisis as a chance to re-energize the work with the SDGs. Now is an opportunity to work for a future that is more fair, equal, and green. This is why Denmark and the other Nordic countries have come together to make sure that we build back better and greener. Soon I'll be launching the third Danish support package to COVID-19 initiatives. Here, Build Back Better and Greener will be a key element. Tackling the problem of climate change also means solving the economic crisis and job creation. Getting a good and decent job is essential. We can create millions of green jobs by investing in renewable energy, energy efficiency, and water. Furthermore, we are expecting to further increase climate financing to the poorest and most vulnerable countries in the coming years, with a focus on energy, water, and other crucial areas. Denmark's support will remain a matter of solidarity with the most vulnerable developing countries. Thank you for listening.
I thank the Minister for his message. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Zohrab Natsakanyan, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia. Please,
thank you very much. Thank you, Minister Klerbadi, and thank you for Kazakhstan's leadership as chair of the group of the landlocked developing countries at the United Nations, and for your commitment to this very important agenda. I'm very grateful to Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres, for his continued support and attention to the needs of the landlocked developing nations. In these challenging times for humanity, messages of hope, trust, and solidarity are indispensable to steering collective action in response to the unprecedented challenges we are facing. Also, profound gratitude to Under-Secretary General Hectamola Utokumano and her office for their important contribution to the work of the group. I'm pleased to join today's conversation as we gather virtually to take stock of the progress and challenges in the implementation of the collective commitments under the Vienna Programme of Action. 6 years into its adoption, the VPOA stands as a blueprint for cooperation between the LLDCs, transit countries, and the development partners, and continues to call for accelerated action relevant as ever. While the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic have affected virtually every corner of our world, our countries in special situations who are most sensitive to global shocks are particularly prone to disproportionate setbacks and consequences of the fallout caused by the pandemic. The landlocked developing countries, whose developmental aspirations are already adversely affected by the structural constraints, including the lack of territorial access to the sea, geographic remoteness and isolation from global markets, and who more often than not have to rely on their transit neighbors for seaborne trade, have become particularly vulnerable to the disruptive impacts of the ongoing crisis. Following the global lockdown measures, the landlocked developing countries have been facing even more constraints to their sustainable and inclusive growth and continue to be affected in unique ways. One crucial and pressing priority before the UN and its development system is therefore to urgently unlock the LLDCs and their trade and productive capacities by way of stepping up efforts to deliver on the key pledge of the VPOA of integrating the LLDCs into the global markets. The launch of the roadmap for accelerated implementation
It seems there are some technical difficulties back in capital. As we are waiting. As we are waiting, meanwhile, let me give the floor to the next speaker. I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Sultan bin Saad Al Muraihi, the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs of Qatar. Please.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Your Excellency, dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, we are pleased to participate in this meeting. We highly appreciate it. The continuous effort by the Republic of Kazakhstan in its capacity as a chair of the Group of Landlocked Development and convening this meeting, which is being held under unprecedented circumstances resulting from a global pandemic whose impact continue to diversely affected all aspects of our life. We cannot but commend the importance of the role of the Office of High Representative of Least Developed Country, Landlocked Development Countries, and Small Island Development State. Excellency, responding to the specific need of landlocked development country and addressing development challenges required an enhanced cooperation to support efforts by those countries to pursue and implement the Sustainable Development Goals and the Vienna Programme of Action for Landlocked Development Country that defines their aspiration and priorities, and thus contribute to finding sustainable solution and accelerating achieving their development. Dear colleague, in line with the principle and commitment of the State of Qatar to the importance of partnership and solidarity, and based on our convention that achieving the ambitious aspiration of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development will not be possible without paying a special attention to the least developed country. We are pleased that the State of Qatar will be hosting the fifth United Nations Conference on the least developed country in Doha from 23rd to 27 January 2022. In light of the current challenges and exceptional circumstances, we look forward for making that conference a significant opportunity to introduce a transformative changes in the life of those living in the most vulnerable countries. We trust that the conference will be a milestone, for it will generate a positive momentum for and significant contribution to the promotion of sustainable development for LDCs. We stress that we will spare no effort to ensure the success of this conference. Excellency, the State of Qatar has never hesitated to pursue its effort as an active partner at the international level, as a part of our effective international cooperation and responses to address the risk posed by climate change. Allow me to recall that the State of Qatar has played an initiating and pioneering role in the Climate Action Summit that was held in September 2019. In that summit, His Highness the Emir of State of Qatar pledged a contribution of $100 million by the State of Qatar to support the LDC and small island developing state in addressing climate change. To ensure that this pledge is translated into concrete action on the ground, the Qatar Fund for Development is developing mechanism through a 10-year strategy aimed at supporting those countries in achieving the ambitious goal of Paris Agreement and pursuing their effort toward sustainable development. Dear colleague, the State of Qatar enjoys constructive and positive relationship with LLDCs. In this spirit of our belief in the importance of meaningful partnership and the urgent needs to work in concert, find solution, the State of Qatar has been keen to support LLDCs. We take this opportunity to note that leveraging genuine and sustainable partnership is critically important in addressing the challenges faced by the LLDCs, especially in light of the current challenges posed by the outbreak of coronavirus pandemic that require strengthening multilateral cooperation to respond to the socio-economic impact of the pandemic. In conclusion, the State of Qatar will remain committed to the principle of partnership and cooperation that represent the fundamental pillars of the State of Qatar policy. Within those constant premises, we will spare no effort to support the aspiration of the LLDCs and their path towards sustainable and inclusive development. I thank you.
And I thank the Minister for his intervention. As I understand, we have back connection with the Foreign Minister of Armenia. So please, Minister. Then let's proceed further. I give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Armida Salcia Alice Janbana, Executive Secretary of the UNESCO. Please, Your Excellency.
Yes. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, the Vienna Programme of Action for LLDCs for the decade 2014-2024 symbolizes the aspirations of the LLDCs on their path towards sustainable development by 2030. Since the onset of COVID-19, there have been considerable negative impacts on more than 167 million people in 12 LLDCs of the Asia-Pacific region, namely surges in additional costs due to connectivity restrictions, 7% increase in trade costs, and 10 to 15% decrease in trade volumes with severe disruptions in service sectors. We must identify strategic directions to mitigate socio-economic impact as well as recover better from this crisis. First, let us focus on sustainable regional connectivity. Member states can promote an integrated multimodal operation with a focus on greater digitalization in connectivity sectors. Strengthening of domestic regulatory policies and institutional changes is key for ensuring partnerships with transit countries through sub-regional and regional connectivity processes. Second, we must facilitate seamless trade. Governments are continuously undertaking robust measures to mitigate border closures by introducing public health protocols. To minimize physical contact, governments can expand cross-border trade, digitalization, and standardization policies, as well as quarantine procedures to build the confidence necessary to ensure trade flows. Third, structural economic transformation must remain a priority. Though there is a risk of setback or a pause, COVID-19 crisis offers an opportunity for economies to transition towards modern service sectors. Sustainable financing, human capital development, and technology-driven policies, including digitalization, remain critical policy drivers. To facilitate the three strategic directions, ESCAP is working with member states and all stakeholders together. With the established regional collaborative mechanism on transport cooperation along the Asian Highway and Trans-Asian Railway Network, member states can stimulate the development of smart, resilient, and environmentally sustainable transport. Digital, resilient, and decarbonized are three guiding principles to build back better for regional connectivity. The Framework Agreement on Facilitation of Cross-Border Paperless Trade in Asia and the Pacific can help reduce trade costs. The Asia-Pacific Information Superhighway Initiative is uniquely suited in finding solutions and approaches for seamless regional digital connectivity. We need a common vision, shared responsibility, and solidarity for a full and timely implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action for LLDCs and sustainable development in this historic moment. Thank you very much.
I thank Executive Secretary for her intervention. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Ceyhun Azizoglu Bayramov, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Azerbaijan. Please, Your Excellency.
Excellencies, dear participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to join you for the annual ministerial meeting of Landlocked Developing Countries. We meet at a time of crisis and we need to step up international cooperation, both to defeat the virus and to address its consequences. At the national level, Azerbaijan adopted the action plan, which is considered not only as anti-crisis response to pandemic, but also serves multiple goals of sustainable development in the post-pandemic period. The World Health Organization has therefore illustrated Azerbaijan as a model country in the fight against COVID-19. To bolster the COVID response efforts across the world, Azerbaijan allocated 10 million to World Health Organization for countries from Africa, Asia, and Latin America. Azerbaijan had put forward a number of important initiatives, including convening of the special session of the UN General Assembly and the summit of the Non-Alignment Movement Contact Group. Mr. Chairman, vulnerability of LLDCs to cross-border restrictions and border closures necessitate a concerted action to enhance connectivity and sustainable functioning of international trade and transport corridors. Regional cooperation is crucial during a pandemic. For example, through collaboration and coordination, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and Central Asian countries have ensured smooth flow of critical supplies during the crisis. More regional cooperation will be needed when moving to the new normal. Regional integration mechanism can play an important role through supporting regional trade agreements. Application of innovative solutions for improving digital freight corridors, including blockchain technologies, is of particular importance. Azerbaijan has been an enabler of inter- and intra-regional transport connectivity projects. These projects are transforming our country into a trans-regional logistical hub. East-West transport, Trans-Caspian International Transport Route, North-South, South-West, and North-West trade routes are the key infrastructure projects designed to increase transit capacity across Eurasia. We have also launched a new cooperation format among 3 landlocked countries, Afghanistan, Azerbaijan, and Turkmenistan, through which we promote, among others, the Lapis Lazuli transport road to unlock the potential of our brotherly country, Afghanistan. Azerbaijan's transport sector has undergone significant reforms in terms of upgrading physical infrastructure and improvement of regulatory framework. Over the last 15 years, the government has invested more than 25 billion in transport infrastructure alone. Crucial initiatives of Azerbaijan, such as backbone railway line, Baku-Tbilisi-Kars, Baku International Sea Trade Port, and the Alat Free Economic Zone will increase opportunities for trans-regional growth in trade and investment. We will continue to provide a stable and transparent business environment to attract more investments and support the diversification drive. As regards the energy sector, Azerbaijan has enhanced its role as a reliable energy supplier. Southern Gas Corridor is nearing its completion, and it will be the most tangible delivery of strengthened interconnectivity. Protection of critical infrastructure is a very important issue. The recent provocation by the Armenian side in July 2020 on Azerbaijan-Armenia border is a clear reminder of this. Armenian armed forces threatened, among others, the critical energy and transportation infrastructure. This infrastructure is not only essential to Azerbaijan's economic vitality, but is also of utmost importance for smooth functioning of trans-regional corridors connecting wider Eurasian region. This provocation highlighted once more the extreme fragility of status quo and the need for the soonest settlement of the Armenia-Azerbaijan Nagorno-Karabakh conflict on the basis of sovereignty, territorial integrity, and inviolability of internationally recognized borders of the Republic of Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan has been contributing to LLDC process since its inception. We remain committed to the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and will continue our efforts to advance interests of this group in international platforms. Thank you for your attention.
I thank Minister for his intervention. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Pradeep Kumar Gyali, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nepal, who will deliver a pre-recorded message.
Mr. Chairman, Honorable Ministers, Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres, USG and High Representative for LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDs, Ms. Utoi Khamanu, distinguished delegates. Let me extend sincere appreciation to Kazakhstan for providing excellent leadership to the group. I thank the UN Secretary General Mr. Guterres for his solidarity and support. I also commend the role played by Madam Otohi Kamanu and her team in promoting the cause of LLDCs. Mr. Chairman, at the dawn of the defining decade on achieving SDGs, the COVID-19 has shaken the world. The disruptions of pandemic have been profound. It has revealed the gaps, compounded the challenges, and multiplied the hardships. With preventive restrictions on travel and transportation, the fallouts of the crisis on LLDCs have been much severe. As the means to respond to the crisis are limited, our countries are struggling to fend off this double-edged sword of health and economic crisis. LLDCs face several challenges because of their remoteness and geographical isolation. Distance escalates the cost of development and trade. The dismal productive capacity has further crushed our trade competitiveness. Excessive commodity dependence has exposed LLDCs to the shocks and fluctuations in international markets. Perennial and large trade deficits have been a sad reality for many LLDCs. Unhindered, cost-effective and accessible infrastructures coupled with smooth trade facilitations measures open up the doors of global market. Investment in infrastructures for LLDCs is an investment in the lifeline of their trade and development. The potentials unleashed by e-commerce and digital technologies could transform LLDCs by liberating their economies from the rigid clutches of geography. Access to easy, affordable, and reliable technology becomes critical for that. Adverse impacts of climate change, such as outburst of glacial lakes, floods, retreat of glaciers, desertification, also pose a serious threat to LLDCs. Unfortunately, the current climate finance architecture has no dedicated window for LLDCs. Mr. Chairman, the midterm review of the BPOA has given us a clear idea on the progress and gaps. We must build on the call for action contained in the political declaration and intensify our efforts to implement 6 priority areas of BPOA at all levels, national, regional, and global. An effective partnership between and among LLDCs, their transit neighbors, development partners, UN, and other stakeholders will be crucial for this. Secretary General's roadmap for accelerating the implementation of BPOA is therefore an important step. What else could be a better way for a system-wide response as we commemorate the 75th anniversary of the organization? In the quest of transforming LLDCs to land linked with vibrant economies, our response needs to be twofold. First, we must put in place a predictable and reliable transit regime and connectivity infrastructures. And second, we must enhance productive capacities by capitalizing the new technologies and embracing low-volume, high-value products. For the present, international solidarity should be there in containing the COVID pandemic and addressing the economic fallouts. In the long run, all means of support, including ODA, trade, technology, and capacity building, need to be deployed to support the LLDCs. Only a genuine spirit of global solidarity to complement the efforts of the LLDCs can ensure that they ride out the current storm and emerge stronger in future. In Nepal, we have mainstreamed the 2030 agenda and the BPOA into our national plans and programs. Transforming Nepal to a land-linked country underpins our national aspiration of prosperous Nepal, happy Nepali. To materialize this aspiration, we have focused on building transport infrastructures, enhancing connectivity, and improving investment environment, among others. Investment in social and human development sector and reforms in governance have produced positive results. Let me conclude, Mr. Chairman, by reaffirming Nepal's commitment to cooperation and solidarity for promoting the group's common interests and making the leap to landlinkedness by leaving no one behind. I thank you all.
I thank Minister for his intervention. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Olga Algayerova, Executive Secretary of the UNEC. Please, Your Excellency.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Your Excellency, Minister of Foreign Affairs, Tile Berdi, my dear colleague Fekita, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. It's my honor to address this annual meeting of foreign ministers of landlocked developing countries. The Euro-Asian region holds about 1/3 of the world's landlocked countries, including some of the largest ones and those who are farthest from open sea. At UNEC, we work to facilitate their integration into the global economy. For example, UNEC is the custodian of 59 legal instruments on safe, sustainable inland transport. 150 UN member states are contracting parties to at least one of them. In the coronavirus context, transport and trade facilitation standards and digital technologies can limit physical checks in transit and at borders, thus mitigating infection risk. The same is true for electronic exchange of information and paperless solutions. UNEC leads several global and regional efforts in these digitalization efforts. First, following the COVID-19 outbreak, we kick-started accelerated implementation of the E-tier international system. This ensures contactless and paperless border crossing, reducing transport times by up to 80% and costs by up to 38%. Our electronic consignment nodes, such as eCMR, allow for electronic tracking and tracing of goods and vehicles. Our UN Center of Trade Facilitation and Electronic Business provides 480 recommendations, trade standards, and tools used by governments and businesses worldwide. In immediate response to the pandemic, UNEC created an online observatory on border crossing status due to COVID-19 to keep vital supply operational. This provides a real-time overview of up-to-date information regarding freight border crossing limitations globally. We also established an informal multidisciplinary advisory group on transport responses to COVID-19, gathering ministries of transport, economy, health, customs committees, road and railway transport operators, shipping companies, and logistic providers. This advisory group takes stock of challenges on inland transport and discusses recommendations to increase preparedness for and resilience to future outbreaks. Beyond our platform for technical dialogue and our transport facilitation tools, we also work on harmonization of technical and regulatory standards, prioritization of infrastructure networks, development of corridors, capacity building, and cooperation between LLDCs and transit countries. For infrastructure connectivity, a flagship of UNEC initiative is the Euro-Asian Transport Links project. It gathers public and private stakeholders from over 35 countries, including from the EU, Central Asia, and South Caucasus, as well as non-UNEC countries such as Afghanistan, China, India, Pakistan, and Mongolia. In the next phase, emphasis will be put on improved coordination mechanism. Also of direct interest to LLDC is the creation of a unified railway law Once in place, this UNEC-led initiative will enable railway operators to operate within a single legal regime along the entire east-west axis, connecting markets in Europe and Asia. A key challenge for sustainable infrastructure development remains the lack of funding. We are establishing a web-based international transport infrastructure observatory. It will enable governments to retrieve the data to prepare, benchmark, and present the transport infrastructure projects. Financial institutions can use the observatory to consider, analyze, and compare projects from a regional and international perspective and identify those they wish to finance. There has been great progress in implementing the Vienna Programme of Action, but more needs to be done to untap the full economic and trade potential of LLDCs. Coordinated actions are required. And finally, UNEC stands ready to continue providing the tools and instruments to do just that. Let us work all together for a world that is more sustainably and efficiently connected. Thank you.
I thank Executive Secretary for her intervention. Now I give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Matsepo Ramakoa, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations, Lesotho. Please, Your Excellency.
President of General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Chairperson, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it is a great honor and privilege to address this august gathering. It is equally gratifying that the work of our group has continued despite the present-day challenges. May I, at the onset, congratulate Kazakhstan for its leadership in steering the work of our group. Mr. Chairman, the comprehensive UN roadmap as a guiding and actionable tool for the acceleration of the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action for the remaining 5-year period couldn't have come at a better time, as it coincides with the commencement of the decade of action aimed at ensuring that no one is left behind. The unprecedented socio-economic impact of COVID-19 have exacerbated the vulnerability of our countries, as they have reversed some of the gains made on the achievement of some sustainable development goals and Vienna Programme of Action priorities, thus putting us further behind. Mr. Chairman, we realize that COVID-19 has placed even greater urgency and importance to addressing the special needs of our countries. Closures of borders, restrictions on movement of people and goods, interruptions in remittances disbursement has further exacerbated the dire challenges that landlocked developing countries are grappling against. We can all attest to the fact that the effects of COVID-19 have re-emphasized the need for LLDCs to embrace the use of digital platforms in order to cope with the new realities that the world is faced with. In an effort to remain on course for the attainment of the SDGs during these trying times, Government of Lesotho has placed major emphasis on restructuring the information and communication technology sector and supporting the applications of ICT in all productive sectors and support sectors to enhance efficiency and promote private sector-led job creation and inclusive economic growth. The high cost associated with ICT has and remains the major impediment towards LLDCs access to ICT-led socio-economic development. It is therefore incumbent on governments to firmly take advantage of regional integration to lower bandwidth prices. We are therefore confident that these initiatives will yield positive indicators related to some of the Vienna Programme of Action priority areas in LLDCs. Mr. Chairman, as I conclude, may I call upon the United Nations system and our development partners to continue to provide the necessary support to LLDCs to accelerate the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. I further wish to reiterate Lesotho's firm commitment to supporting your visionary leadership and that of the Office of the High Representative concerted efforts of better positioning us in addressing challenges and achieving goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, as well as the Vienna Programme of Action priority areas in this remaining 5-year term. I thank you.
I thank Minister for her intervention. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Houlin Zhao, Secretary General of the International Telecommunication Union.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Very good.
Your Excellency, please proceed. The floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Excellencies, ministers, ambassadors, head of UN agencies, my dear sister Fakit Katwa, Under Secretary General and High Representative for AIS. Ladies and gentlemen, it's a very great honor for me to address this meeting. My sincere thanks to the invitation by His Excellency, Mr. Makta Tileberdi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Republic of Kazakhstan, to make ITU as part of this meeting. We meet at a moment of deep concern over the special challenges facing LLDCs. The pandemic is threatening to reverse our country's progress toward the Sustainable Development Goals. As the UN Specialized Agency for Information and Communication Technologies, ITU remains committed to leveraging ICTs to accelerate the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and SDGs. Essential to this effort is improving international connectivity conditions in line with the revised resolution on special measures for LLDCs and other vulnerable countries. I'm pleased that the midterm review of the Vienna Programme of Action held at the UN General Assembly last December identified ICT infrastructure connectivity as critical and crucial. And I join the call to action for greater investment and better domestic investment environments in ICT, outlined in the UN roadmap for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action for LLDCs in the remaining 5 years. Digital infrastructure is not just a convenience, but an essential requirement to take an active part in society and the economy. And that is why, through newly launched initiatives such as Connected to Recover, ITU will help expand access to affordable and reliable connectivity in some of the least well-connected countries. Excellencies, we stand at a pivotal moment where the improvement of connectivity is slowing down, where broadband services can still be too expensive for some poorest consumers, and where, as shown by ITU's new Connecting Humanity study, levels of financing needed to extend networks to unserved communities are unprecedented. Creating environments conducive to investment in ICTs for private sector investment has never been more important. This question was at the heart of ITU's Global Symposium for Regulators earlier this month, an event that has fostered a dynamic industry regulators dialogue between regulators, policymakers, industry leaders, and other key ICT stakeholders since 2000. As I told the BRICS Communications Ministers meeting and the G20 Financial and Health Ministers meeting just last week, when ICT investments are fragmented among different ministries and not well coordinated within the same country, we risk causing capacity inefficiencies and resource shortfalls at precisely the time when more investment in ICTs are needed. Here, I'd like to admire the effort by our host Kazakhstan. I know that in Kazakhstan government, almost every ministry, they have a vice minister responsible for ICT. So that is, up to now, is the only case I heard so far. It's very good. As foreign ministers, you play a key role in catalyzing private sector investment in ICT in LLDCs and ensuring that these investments fit within a sound whole of government ICT investment strategy. So ladies and gentlemen, as we discuss how ICT can help us fight COVID-19, let us remember that more than 40% of the population of LLDCs still lacks access to the digital infrastructure, technologies, and services that have been so essential during this crisis. I believe that neither the Vienna Programme of Action nor the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development will be achieved until everyone, everywhere is connected. I'm here today to reaffirm ITU's strong support to LLDCs in this decade of action more than ever before. I think that we need to work together. I would landlocked developing countries may be natural fear a sense of isolation. Rest assured that ITU will continue to work by your side to address the pandemic, prepare for recovery, and help accelerate the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and SDGs. Our wish is for landlocked countries to become land-connected countries by ICT, and for all people to be connected. I thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Secretary General for his intervention. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Dr. Karen Longarik, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bolivia. It seems there are some details, so allow me to proceed to the next speaker. I give the floor to His Excellency Dr. Tandi Dorji, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bhutan, who will deliver a pre-recorded message.
Mr. Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, greetings from the Kingdom of Bhutan. At the outset, allow me to convey my deepest sympathies to all who have been impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic, and I pray that we can collectively overcome this challenging period very soon. It is a great pleasure for me to participate at this annual ministerial meeting of foreign ministers of landlocked developing countries, and I would like to thank the chair of the LLDC group, Kazakhstan, for successfully coordinating the events of our group and in convening this meeting. I would also like to express my government's appreciation to the United Nations High Representative for the LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDs, Ms. Fikita Utaikamanu, and her office for the continued effort in bringing to the forefront the development challenges faced by our countries. The meeting this year is being held at the backdrop of the unprecedented challenge posed by the pandemic, which has led to devastating effects on both healthcare and the economy, with many countries resorting to closing borders and restricting movement of people and goods. LLDCs have been the most affected. The VPOA constitutes an integral part for the LLDCs in the fulfillment of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. The high-level midterm review in 2019 noted that the progress made by the LLDCs was insufficient to achieve the VPOA targets and the SDGs. Given the severe effects of the pandemic on the LLDCs, socioeconomic progress is further expected to be impeded, potentially derailing our progress. It is in this light that I take this opportunity to commend and congratulate Kazakhstan for developing the UN roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA, which provides a strategic vision with a focus on key deliverables to accelerate actions in the remaining period of the VPOA implementation. Bhutan has been fighting the pandemic through the whole of society approach. Under the leadership of His Majesty the King, we have had to make tough decisions such as closing our borders, instituting a government-funded mandatory 21-day quarantine for travelers returning to Bhutan, and instituting widespread testing. These strict measures, along with public health safety protocols, have been successful in avoiding community transmission and having zero COVID-related death. However, our economy has taken a severe hit. All sectors of the economy have been severely impacted, and the GDP growth has slumped to its lowest at negative 6.7%. For Bhutan, like most countries, we are trying to find a balance between containing the epidemic and stimulating the economy. We are doing this through a major overhaul of the country's 12th five-year plan to prioritize economic recovery by intensifying exports, front-loading resources, boosting domestic consumption capacity, investing in agriculture, and identifying productive sectors to generate domestic revenue. This will also contribute in meeting the Economic Vulnerability Index, one of 3 criteria which Bhutan has not met in its graduation from the LDC group. To conclude, I would like to reiterate that Bhutan is committed to working together in addressing the common challenges faced by all LLDCs and join fellow LLDCs in calling on development partners, the United Nations, the international financial institutions, and other international organizations to support LLDCs in accelerating implementation of the VPOA. Please stay safe. Thank you, and Tashidile.
I thank Minister for his message, and I wish to remind all speakers not to exceed 3 minutes limit of their statements. Next, I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Cunio Mikuria, Secretary General of the World Customs Organization.
Mr. Chairperson, thank you for inviting the WCO to this important meeting. I would like to congratulate and commend Kazakhstan and the UNOHRLLS for initiating and developing the UN roadmap for accelerated implementation of Vienna Programme of Action. The WCO has contributed to the development of the roadmap and remain committed to support LLDCs by setting standards for simplified and harmonized border procedures and delivering capacity building programs and coordinating and cooperating with other donor community. As outlined in the roadmap, the WCO's contributions are focused on 4 areas: transit, trade, and transport facilitation, ITC infrastructure and digital connectivity, public and private dialogue and development of the private sector, and finally, the impact of COVID-19. In more concrete, the WCO develops and maintains its instrument, such as the revised Kyoto Convention for simplification and harmonization of custom procedures, transit guidelines, and the draft compendium of best practices in transit. WCO also delivers capacity building through the Mercator program for application of WCO tools, institutional development of customs, and the uniform implementation of the agreement of trade facilitation of the WTO. Well, turning to the COVID-19, it has underlined the importance of the smooth facilitation, smooth functioning of transit, trade, and corridors and transport. Recognizing the difficulties faced by landlocked countries, on 29th of March, the WCO and UNOHRLSS issued a joint statement calling upon LLDCs and transit countries to maintain the continuity of international and regional trade supply chain under the pandemic. Partnering with other international organizations and the private sector is only part of the avenues followed by the WCO in the efforts to support our members, customer administrations, and to mitigate the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Since March, we've been developing new guideline documents for member states and also sharing best practices and supporting customs enforcement activities to protect the society. Great support for LLDCs is essential for the achievement of SDGs by 2030. WCO is committed to supporting the LLDCs in the context of SDGs with its theme of the year as customs fostering sustainability for people, prosperity, and the planet. I thank you for your attention.
I thank Secretary General for his intervention. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Sirojuddin Mukhriddin, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Tajikistan, who will deliver pre-recorded message.
Distinguished Mr. Chair, distinguished Undersecretary General and High Representative for LDC seats and LLDCs, ladies and gentlemen, we stand at pivotal crossroads in our history, unprecedented in its scale and impact. The COVID-19 pandemic that began as a health crisis has quickly become the world's socio-economic crisis. In this regard, we welcome the call by UN Secretary General to tackle the health emergency and focus on the social impact and economic response measures. Mr. Chair, despite some progress in implementing the VPOA, there are still significant gaps and challenges that need to be addressed. To this end, advancing the issues of transit and transport, international trade, information communication technology, regional integration, trade facilitation, and climate change, among other things, in the COVID-19 era would be paramount for the interest of the group. Tajikistan pays special attention to promoting and expanding sub-regional and regional trade. We believe particular attention should be given to the development of infrastructure, enhancement of competitiveness and trade, regional cooperation, and assistance for economic growth and sustainable development. To this end, the construction of the interregional transmission line CASA 1000 aimed at exporting electricity from Tajikistan and Kyrgyzstan to Afghanistan and Pakistan, which will increase the well-being of the population and ensures energy security in the region, becomes important. It will be also led to an increase in industrial production and trade in the Central and South Asian regions. Mr. Chair, LLDCs are the most water-stressed countries. Water challenges are exacerbated by the effects of climate change prevalent in the LLDCs, such as desertification, droughts, and land degradation, as well as water-related natural hazards. In our opinion, one of the prominent platforms to address water-related challenges would be International Decade for Action Water for Sustainable Development 2018-2028, which each member of the group supported in 2016. Dear colleagues, Tajikistan will submit a draft proposal on the modalities of the UN Water Conference 2023 this fall. We hope it will have your valuable and full support. I thank you for your attention.
I thank Minister for his message. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Eisenhower Mkaka, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malawi. Your Excellency, we cannot hear you. Please unmute your microphone. We still cannot hear you, Your Excellency. It seems your microphone, Minister, muted. Please unmute. It seems that Minister is having some connection difficulties. I believe for now we can pass the floor to the following speaker and then get back to the Minister. Then now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Michael Lodge, Secretary General of the International Seabed Authority.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Honourable Minister Tlebedi, High Representative Fekito Toikamanu, Excellencies, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you very much for this opportunity to intervene on behalf of the International Seabed Authority. Established 26 years ago by the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, our mandate is to ensure the sustainable management of deep seabed minerals located beyond national jurisdiction for the benefit of all humanity. In doing so, ISA is under a positive obligation to promote the effective participation of developing states and to recognize the special needs of developing landlocked states. This is the direct result of the strong engagement of the group of landlocked states during the negotiation that led to the adoption of UNCLOS. Today, more than ever, it is of utmost importance to recall that such opportunities exist, as these rights, formally recognized in the Convention, are fundamental to achieving the outcomes of the Vienna Programme of Action and ensuring that all can benefit from the promise of the blue economy. As far as ISA is concerned, the rights of developing landlocked states are even more explicit. They have the right to participate in deep-sea mineral exploration and marine scientific research, as well as to share in the financial and economic benefits from deep-sea minerals. That is why, since I took office, I have taken a particularly active interest in the work of the UN OHR LLS and continue to urge landlocked developing states, who make up 10% of the membership of ISA, to take full advantage of the opportunities available to them. I also urge the remaining 12 landlocked developing states who are not yet party to UNCLOS to become parties as soon as possible. I would like to end this short intervention by reiterating the commitment of ISA to supporting the Vienna Programme of Action and the roadmap for accelerated intervention. In particular, we would like to work with each and every one of you through our partnership with UN OHR LLS to support your needs in terms of capacity development in marine science, especially for women. This has the potential to provide new opportunities for economic and social development, and with your help and engagement, we will thrive to ensure that these opportunities are also available to landlocked developing countries. I thank you very much for this opportunity to join your meeting.
I thank Secretary General for his intervention. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Dr. Lemogang Kwape, Minister of International Affairs and Cooperation of Botswana, who will deliver a pre-recorded message.
Your Excellency, Mr. Mukhtar Tilebedi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan and the Chair of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries, fellow ministers here present, distinguished delegates, I'm honored to participate in this important annual meeting of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries, LLDCs, for the first time, particularly that it comes shortly after my appointment as the Minister of International Affairs and Cooperation of the Republic of Botswana. Allow me to join other colleagues in commending you on your assumption of the chairship and the sterling job you've done in steering the work of our group, especially during this difficult time occasioned by COVID-19 pandemic. Chairperson, Botswana fully endorsed the theme for this year's meeting, partnering for accelerated implementation of Vienna Programme of Action, VPOA, and achieving sustainable development in LLDCs. It is in sync with our collective aspiration of urgently resetting our economies in the debilitating aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic. This meeting is timely as it allows us to reflect our achievements and challenges, as well as intensify our efforts to fast-track implementation of our collective blueprint, the Vienna Programme of Action, VPOA. Chairperson, it goes without saying that this pandemic has gravely exacerbated the myriad of challenges already confronting us, both as a landlocked and transit countries. The pandemic prevention and containment protocols, which include lockdowns and border closure, have far-reaching consequences on our livelihoods and the overall socio-economic development agenda. As the demand for the repatriation, goods and services increased, we experienced even higher costs of trade due to weak transport infrastructure, coupled with non-tariff barriers of delays and inefficiencies associated with cross-border management. However, on a positive note, I must also underline that while our vulnerabilities were accentuated during this difficult time, we also benefited from the immense good international partnerships and cooperation, which facilitated expeditious and smooth flow of much-needed goods and services. This has revealed abundant opportunities and good lessons we can now build on in our collective response to our common challenges besieging the LLDCs. We are most appreciative of the generous and wide-ranging support accorded to us by our development partners and international organizations in response to the COVID-19 pandemic and our development agenda. We therefore fully concur that this platform is an ideal opportunity for us to renew our commitment to redouble our efforts to accelerate implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. Chairperson, Botswana continues to make notable strides in addressing her development challenges. In line with our National Vision 2036, the government of Botswana recently adopted an economic recovery and transformation agenda, which is aligned to the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development. I wish to underscore that enhanced international partnership, particularly regional cooperation, is of paramount importance in the advancement of our transformation agenda. Botswana is thus actively pursuing strategy for regional cooperation on infrastructural development and integration as means of creating more trade routes and expanding market access. In this regard, together with our neighbors, South Africa and Namibia, we have built a Trans-Kalahari corridor. This highway is aimed at facilitating faster and cheaper movements of goods and services between our two countries. Furthermore, Mr. Chairperson, Botswana, and Zambia have embarked on the construction of Kazungula Bridge between the two countries. This joint project is aimed at further facilitating movements of goods and persons, as well as trade within Southern African Development Community region and other regions. Chairperson, with regards to trade and facilitation, Botswana continues to work with her neighbors to harmonize policies that will support expeditious flow of goods and services. To further operationalize this objective, Botswana has completed the review of the National Trade Policy and the National Export Strategy, which are intended, amongst others, to contribute to economic export diversification, improved global competitiveness, as well as poverty eradication. Chairperson, we are also confident that these objectives are attainable through an enhanced South-South cooperation and effective mobilization of domestic resources in partnership with the private sector. Such partnerships, which are based on mutual benefit and aligned with our national priorities, are critical for our LLDCs, especially during this period of COVID-19 crisis. Chairperson, let me conclude my remarks by emphasizing for us LLDCs, unilateralism can never be an option. Productive partnerships and multilateralism are the driving force behind our survival and remain critical in advancing our interests and achievements of the Vienna Programme of Action and the SDGs. I thank you for your attention.
I thank Minister for his message.
I've been unmuted.
And now I give again floor to His Excellency Mr. Ezinharu Mkaka, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Malawi. Please, Your Excellency, the floor is yours.
Your Excellency, Mr. Mukhtar Tuleberdi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan and Global Chair of LLDCs, Your Excellency, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations, Your Excellency, Victor Molak Katoa Otoka Manu, Under Secretary and High Representative of Least Developed Countries, Landlocked Developing Countries, and Small Island Developing States. Allow me to first express profound gratitude from the people and the government of the Republic of Malawi to the High Representative and to the current chair of the LLDCs Kazakhstan for ably organizing and coordinating this meeting. This is a clear example of how we can collectively adapt to the tough conditions brought by the COVID-19 pandemic to pursue our common interests. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to be here, having recently attended the Ministerial meeting on Vienna Programme of Action on LDCs on 28th July 2020. This meeting is vital as it will enable the scope on how best we can collectively utilize the Vienna Programme of Action to achieve sustainable development goals. Challenges stifling economic growth in LLDCs are strikingly similar: lack of territorial access to the sea, isolation and remoteness from the world markets, which all lead to high transport and transit costs, thereby negatively affecting the business environment of our economies. It is a fact that we are not the main culprits of environmental degradation, yet we are the biggest victims of vulnerabilities arising from climate change, which continue to impose constraints on our overall socioeconomic well-being. The onset of COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated border and transit measures impacting negatively on trade facilitation and increasing transit fees. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Vienna Programme of Action provides us a great opportunity of implementing a holistic, internationally coordinated effort to counter challenges faced by LLDCs. There is need for clear policies for implementing the program's priority areas of transit, infrastructure development, policy issues, international trade facilitation, regional integration, structural economic transformation, and means of implementation. It is my sincere hope that we will craft a clear roadmap on how these issues can be incorporated in our national development policies. At a national level, Malawi is undertaking various initiatives by engaging with our regional neighbors and the international community on transit policy issues and development of regional infrastructure in areas such as transport, information, and communication technology. Our interest is to develop adequate transit infrastructure network for our country to be land-linked and become regionally and internationally connected. I conclude by reaffirming Malawi government's full commitment to the ongoing implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action in order to realize its priorities for action. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank Minister for his intervention. I now give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Vera Songwei, Executive Secretary of the UN Economic Commission for Africa.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, distinguished delegates, UN Secretary General, Secretaries of the Regional Commission, Honorable Ministers and Development Partners. Let me first of all start by commending the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the Republic of Kazakhstan, yourself, the Global Chair of the Group of LLDCs and the Office of the High Representative of Least Developed Countries, my sister, and Landlocked Developing Countries and Small Island Developing States for convening the annual ministerial meeting on the margins of UNGA 2020. We would, of course, have liked to be in person to have these conversations, but I think that this meeting also tells us some of the triumphs that small island developing states and landlocked countries face. For Africa, we are the home to 32 landlocked developing countries, which all face special trade and development challenges arising from their lack of territorial access to the sea and geographic remoteness from international markets. They suffer from lack of competitiveness of both exports and imports, as well as a reduction in their purchasing power of their populations. This has been exacerbated by the COVID-19 crisis, as you know, total disruption of global supply chains, which is even more difficult when we start talking about landlocked countries. The poverty headcount on the continent is about 55.8% in LLDCs as compared to an average of just 8% in non-LLDCs. GDP per capita on the continent in Africa is 1,500, while non-LLDCs is 5,208. So almost 4 times the differential. Shows you the economic challenges that the LLDCs on the continent are facing. Africa's infrastructure deficit hits the LLDCs even harder. They don't have border boundaries with the sea, so they have to add additional infrastructure to their development costs. Already in a poor infrastructure environment, this makes it even more difficult for them to catch up. Only 30% of Africans living in the LLDCs have access to electricity. We know the problems and we know the triumphs of LLDCs. In recognition of this, of the difficulties that LLDCs are facing, the UN, the Secretary General, and of course under the leadership of the UN OHLS office, have made this conversation on the continent a priority conversation. The high-level political declaration that was adopted in 2019 alongside the visionary roadmap on the implementation for multiple projects for LLDCs is a testimony to the importance that the UN and the African Union give to this agenda. And we know that if we do not succeed on this agenda, we will not succeed in achieving Agenda 2030 and or Agenda 2063, which is the African agenda. According to UNCTAD, we know the LLDCs continue to suffer. There has been a contraction in trade because of COVID, but even more so from our LLDCs. So that is one of the reasons why we believe that supporting the African Continental Free Trade Area Agreement will help us to deliver for the LLDCs as well, because creating value within the continent means that we have to go through LLDC countries. We have to take what is the best of them to add to the best of us, to be able to come up with products that are adding value, creating jobs, and ensuring that there is more peace and security in our LLDCs on the continent. Mobilizing resources for the LLDCs has become primordial as a survival tool, not just because of COVID, but because in the 10 years to Agenda 2030, we will need, if Africa has to stand up to the Sustainable Development Goals, to also deliver on the agenda for the LLDCs. This is why collectively, the UN country teams across the continent are working harder than ever to see how we can pull together our efforts in the areas of technology to begin with. A lot of our LLDCs are those that are the most technologically distant, those who have less access to technology and therefore are surviving even less from the pandemic. How can we ensure that new and innovative ideas of getting technology to these distant populations is done and done in an accelerated manner? Education, the distances between the LLDCs and countries on the borders is also quite vast, not just globally, but also for girls. Our Sahelian countries in particular, 1 in every 10 girls is in school today. We need to make sure that we can also look at the gender equality lens of the LLDC countries and ensure that we bring those girls back into the global community. One of the things that we're working on, of course, is digital ID to ensure that each member of the LLDCs on the continent has access to an identity, has access to technology that allows them to become performing members of society. Rights. The LLDCs have less rights. We know, and when we look at the continent, that a lot of the conversations around insecurity, around peace and development, around inclusion are less prevalent in the LLDC parts of the world. And even within, when we talk about LLDCs, we tend to talk about the countries, but even within communities, we look at big countries like Nigeria, the internal far-flung parts of the country are also suffering. We need to understand how we can bring more dialogue, more transparency, more voice to those communities. And that is why, again, programs that the UN is putting in place, such as Spotlight, are meant to address issues of voice and inclusion, particularly for women in these areas, issues of empowerment, issues of autonomy that will help them deliver and help the UN deliver on Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030. Finally, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the last thing that I would like to say and bring to your attention is, as we celebrate this decade of action, and we wonder how we are going to win the COVID crisis and ensure that we meet Agenda 2030 as we started it, as we launched the Decade of Action a few days ago, and the UN at 75. No time has been more important to have multilateralism. If there is any one group of countries that needs and that demands our consistent, sustained support, it is the LLDCs. And I think through the discussions that we're having here today, we know that the UN stands behind them in Africa, and we hope that we can continue our commitment and concerted effort to ensure that the LLDCs are part of the African integration agenda and part of Agenda 2063 and Agenda 2030 as we strive to leave no one behind, marching towards 2030 and a world that is free of poverty. Thank you very much for your attention.
I thank Executive Secretary for her intervention. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Nshuti Manasseh, the Minister of State of Rwanda.
His Excellency Volkan Bazok, President of the 75th UN General Assembly, His Excellency Mukata Bedi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan and the Global Chair of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries, distinguished participants. It's a great honor to take part in the annual general meeting of Foreign Affairs of Landlocked Developing Countries, as well as to renew our collective commitment to the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action for landlocked developing countries. The current global context characterized by the COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated the special development challenges of landlocked developing countries, threatening to further marginalize our prospective development agenda and access to international markets. Indeed, our reliance on transit countries for international trade, as well as cross-border management measures implemented to contain COVID, has affected movement of our goods and services to and from landlocked developing countries. In this context, the Vienna Programme of Action for landlocked developing countries, adopted in 2014 for the decade 2014-2024, provides a direction and ambition to overcome the socio-economic impact of this global health pandemic on landlocked developing countries. Furthermore, as we enter into the UN Decade of Action, the effective implementation of Vienna Programme of Action will play a key role in the attainment by landlocked developing countries of the UN Sustainable Development Goals. It's against this background and in line with the high-level political declaration adopted in New York in December 2019 that the government of the Republic of Rwanda welcomes the adoption of the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. Chairman, we are committed to play a leading role in supporting the roadmap for acceleration implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. To this extent, I'm honored to announce the intention of the government of Rwanda to sign the multilateral agreement for establishment of the international think tank for landlocked developing countries, as well as the nomination of a national focal point to spearhead the implementation of Vienna Programme of Action. Finally, as we commemorate 75th anniversary of United Nations Charter and its principles, the government of the Republic of Rwanda is calling for more international cooperation between landlocked and transit developing countries, as well as the system, to further accelerate the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. I would like to conclude by expressing our sincere recognition to the government of the Republic of Kazakhstan in its capacity as chair of the group of landlocked developing countries for its outstanding leadership in the preparatory process of this annual ministerial meeting. I thank you for your attention.
I thank Minister for his intervention. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Peter Lonsky, Deputy Minister for Foreign Affairs of Austria, Chair of the Group of Friends of LLDC, who will deliver a pre-recorded message.
It is my great privilege to participate in this year's Ministerial Meeting of Foreign Ministers of Landlocked Developing Countries. 2020 is an extraordinary year in many aspects. On Monday, we commemorated the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. We are entering the SDG Decade of Action, and we are fighting the COVID-19 pandemic, a human crisis with unprecedented socio-economic consequences that risk reversing progress achieved so far. As a long-standing partner of the LLDCs and a landlocked country ourselves, we understand and feel many of your challenges, and we stand ready to share our experience. It is for this reason that we hosted the second UN Conference on Landlocked Developing Countries in Vienna in 2014, that Austria co-chairs the group of friends of the LLDCs, and that together with Bhutan, we co-facilitated the outcome document of the midterm review of the Vienna Programme of Action, which was adopted last December. Based on our national experience as landlocked country, we are convinced that strong regional cooperation and integration, investment in critical infrastructure, trade and private sector investment, as well as international support and ODA are effective means to address potential negative effects of lacking direct geographic access to oceans. We welcome the focus of the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. Building on the findings of the midterm review, we remain fully committed to continue our partnership and common effort towards the goals set out in the Vienna Programme of Action, and to ensure that achievements and progress are not undermined by the impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. Addressing the challenges of COVID-19, we are all aware that LLDCs face particular challenges and development disadvantages, compounded by the impact of COVID-19. We remain convinced that many of the challenges related to landlockedness can be addressed. From the outset of the pandemic, Austria has reacted swiftly by providing additional resources for a coordinated response with a focus on water and sanitation, as well as the procurement of personal protective equipment. Austria contributes to the maintenance and improvement of water supply and sanitation in the region of Amhara in Ethiopia. Austria supports the Bhutanese COVID-19 response plan, procuring protective clothing, test kits, face masks, and ventilators. In Burkina Faso, Austria supports the COVID-19 program of ECHO to strengthen the healthcare system and prevention. UNDP is organizing the COVID-19 response and recovery window of Moldova's 2030 SDGs fund, which addresses the social and economic impact of the pandemic and to which Austria proudly contributes. Multilateral action is key in addressing the current global challenges. In times of crisis, more than ever, we need to stand together. Thank you for the opportunity, and again, let me reiterate Austria's full support for and solidarity with the LLDCs.
I thank Deputy Minister for his message, and now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Li Yong, Director General of the UN Industrial Development Organization.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. All protocols observed. It is a great honor for me to attend the annual meeting of the Minister of Foreign Affairs of Landlocked Developing Countries. I hope to find you well and safe during the difficult times. And UNIDO welcomes the UN roadmap for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action, an important framework to implement during this decade of action. Inclusive and sustainable industrial development is well reflected in the UN roadmap and contributes to several priority areas of the VPOA related to the socio-economic transformation of LLDCs. UNIDO is operating under the full ownership of the implementing country, the Program for Country Partnership, PCP in short, in LLDCs such as Ethiopia, Kyrgyzstan, Rwanda, and Zambia. This innovative model, tailored to a country's development needs, creates strong interlinkages between the different VPOA priority areas to maximize the impact on the ground. The development impact in LLDCs from the PCP is a greater with joint solutions designed in partnership and leasing investment from the private sector, international financial institutions, and development partners. With the onset of the fourth industrial revolution, LLDCs have the opportunity to advance their economic social development through the new technologies. Yet, most LLDCs are not using or producing advanced digital technologies in manufacturing. The VPOA priority on structural economic transformation therefore requires international support to help LLDCs move up the technological ladder to remove their reliance on outdated industrial capabilities. Partnerships are at the forefront of UNIDO's coordinated responses during these unprecedented times. UNIDO engaged with the UN country teams in LLDCs through the joint programs, the UN Interagency Clusters on Trade and Productive Capacity, a partnership between UNIDO, FAO, ILO, ACTAD, and the UNDP is supportive to the survival and the resilient recovery of micro, small, medium enterprises. This alliance will contribute to the acceleration of the VPOA priority on international trade and trade facilitation in LLDCs. UNIDO is confident and committed to unlocking the partnership for industrial and economic development potential of the LLDCs in the coming years and during and beyond COVID-19. We are committed to this task, which is very important for us to make a contribution to the implementation of the VPOA. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and also very happy to join this important event. Thank you.
I thank Director General for his intervention. Now we have pre-recorded message of His Excellency Mr. Redwan Hussein, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ethiopia.
Mr. Chairperson, at the outset, I wish to join others in commending you for your country's leadership in effectively steering the work of the LLDCs. Let me take this opportunity to assure you of our continued support in the effective discharge of your responsibilities. Ethiopia attached great importance to the work of this group, and I want to express my appreciation to the strategic support provided by the Office of the High Representative for the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and the small island developing states in the promoting the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. Mr. Chairperson, it is shortly after the adoption of the political declaration on the comprehensive high-level midterm review of the implementation of the VPOA 5 December 2019 that the unprecedented and multidimensional impact of the COVID-19 pandemic posed greater risk to us, the LLDCs. The pandemic is not only threatening to roll back the development gains that we've made over the past decades, but it's also forcing us to be left further behind in meeting the goals and targets of the Vienna Programme of Action and Agenda 2030 for Sustainable Development. The pandemic is exacerbating the already existing development challenge due to our geographical locations and other structural obstacles. While we continue to take these policy measures to promote structural transformation, diversify our economic and increase our exports, special trade and development-related challenges such as remoteness from global market and high transit cost arising from our lack of direct access to the sea, constrain our endeavors to meet the Vienna Programme of Action, which is an integral part of 2030 agenda. Due to our specific development bottlenecks, our share of global trade remains low. We also continue to depend on few export items with extremely limited capacity to add manufacturing value. Huge infrastructural gaps that hinder regional integration and a slow structural transformation process further undermine our efforts to meet the objectives of the Vienna Programme of Action. In addition, lack of adequate finance and technological and institutional capacity aggravate our development challenge. Mr. Chairperson, to fully implement the action areas set out in the Vienna Programme of Action, there is a need for a reinvigorated and renewed global partnership with our development partners and development stakeholders, both public and private. In this regard, we believe coordinated and enhanced international support in the areas of manufacturing, trade, and productive capacities that complement our national endeavors would highly contribute to meeting the objectives of the VPOA. In addition, establishing effective and efficient infrastructure system and facilitating the smooth and fast movement of goods and services are critical to integrate LLDCs into the global market. In this connection, the cooperation and partnership of transit countries remains absolutely vital. Of course, what is at stake at the moment is how to forestall the multifaceted impact of the global pandemic. That's why our meeting is so important to exchange views on charting the way forward. The need for international community's engagement to mitigate the economic and social consequences of COVID-19 through rigorous support to build resilient health system and protect employment and incomes cannot be overemphasized. Particularly, the burden of unsustainable external debt is a major development challenge that would be addressed. Therefore, an urgent call should be made to all creditors to provide rapid solutions to this issue. Developing countries, particularly African countries, LDCs and LLDCs, do not have the reserve cushion to withstand the impact of these shocks, which necessitate an urgent mobilization of funds to address their debt relief needs. Mr. Chairperson, we in Ethiopia have integrated the Vienna Programme of Action into our national development plan and priorities. While we recognize that landlockedness increases our development constraints, we have been taking policy measures to improve our manufacturing base and enhance our connectedness as well as competitiveness. In this respect, achieving inclusive and sustainable industrialization and building resilient infrastructure have been a matter of priority for us. Based on our comparative advantage, we've given a special attention to labor-intensive and light manufacturing sectors, agro-processing, leather, and textile. We've also established industrial parks that simplify access to land, eliminate the challenges in trade logistics and customs services. These policy actions are contributing to enhance our global competitiveness and participation in the global value chain. With our next 10-year prospective plan, we are also focusing on the mining and tourism sectors to unleash our potential for accelerating economic growth and development. In addition, we've been making massive public investment in building infrastructure with the objective of enhancing our productive capacity and promoting regional integration. Encouraging progress has been registered in expanding road, railway, and transport services. We've also been working with neighboring transit countries to establish and maintain effective transit systems based on common interest. Recently, we've taken bold and historical decisions that would, among others, diversify our sea outlets and further promote regional integration. While we've registered some progress in relation to the above-mentioned measures we've taken in the course of the past decades, we fully recognize that a lot remains to be done to realize inclusive and sustainable development for our people, particularly at the time of the pandemic. The same holds true in other LDCs as well. That's why we need to see this opportunity to reaffirm our commitment to the full and effective implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and SDGs, all the more so as we enter the decade of action for the SDGs. Let me conclude by assuring you that we, on our part, are ready to do so in close collaboration with our development partners. I thank you.
I thank Deputy Minister for his message. Now we have pre-recorded message of His Excellency Mr. Mirwas Nab, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Afghanistan.
Rahim, Your Excellency Mr. Mukhtar Tulburdi, Minister of the Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan and Chair of the Landlocked Developing Countries. Your Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır, President of the 75th Session of the United Nations General Assembly. Your Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the United Nations. Distinguished Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, 2020 is a challenging year for the international community, especially for the LLDCs, as the COVID-19 pandemic has caused global social and economic disruption. The efforts of the United Nations High Representative for the least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and small island developing states, and Kazakhstan as the chair of the LLDCs have contributed significantly to minimize the negative impact both in response to the pandemic and in our quest for development. I would especially like to extend our appreciation to Kazakhstan for developing the roadmap for LLDCs. We believe that the implementation of the roadmap will increase the effectiveness of the group, and contribute to implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and Sustainable Development Goals. As we know, the COVID-19 pandemic has had a disproportionate effect on our nations. The nature of our geography has made us dependent on open borders and free flow of goods between our countries. We must continue to work together to advocate for our needs and ensure the maintenance of global trade and supply chains. Further efforts are needed to promote sustainable transport and infrastructure investment. We must seize the opportunity in conversation about the lessons learned from the pandemic to promote our needs. Building back better should include efforts to further enhance connectivity between landlocked states and our neighbors and to promote regional trade and investment. In this connection, I also would like to recall the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, Part 10, Article 125. Landlocked states shall enjoy freedom of transit through the territory of transit state by all means of transportation. Excellencies, Afghanistan believes that the effective implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action within its time frame remains imperative for all LLDCs and the world as a whole. LLDCs will not achieve the Sustainable Development Goals without the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. The government of Afghanistan is fully committed to implement the Vienna Programme of Action as outlined in our February 2019 Vienna Programme of Action National Report. Our government has mainstreamed the Vienna Programme of Action into national development plans and established an institutional mechanism to work towards the full implementation of the program and sustainable development goals. As a landlocked and post-conflict country, Afghanistan continues to face numerous special development needs and challenges, including those related to the lack of access to the regional and international markets, infrastructure gaps, investment deficit, as well as the shortage of human and institutional capacity in various areas. To address Afghanistan's complex needs, the government has taken a number of important steps. Afghanistan has made intensive efforts to utilize its central location as a regional land bridge connecting Central Asia and South Asia. In this regard, projects such as the Peace-Lazuli Corridor, the Five Nations Railway Corridor, and energy projects like CASA 1000 and Chapi electricity and natural gas initiatives will have a profound impact on regional connectivity and economic development. Ladies and gentlemen, peace, security, and stability are essential to achieve sustainable development. Terrorism and insecurity continue to be the main obstacle to our efforts for a peaceful and stable Afghanistan. To end decades of violence, the government and the people of Afghanistan welcome the peace negotiation with the Taliban and constructively engaged in this process. Therefore, we see the Doha meeting as a unique opportunity for creating an environment conducive for peace and sustainable development, where the value and gains of the last 19 years are protected and buildable. Taking this opportunity, I would like to express our gratitude to our international partner for providing this opportunity and stand with the Islamic Republic of Afghanistan. Additionally, the upcoming Geneva Conference on Afghanistan will significantly contribute to the peace negotiation and development. The conference will provide a unique opportunity for both the government of Afghanistan and the international community to discuss Afghanistan's strategy and vision for socio-economic development in the next 5 years. Mr. Chairman, distinguished ministers, Afghanistan joined others in calling for the increased global cooperation and solidarity in our shared aim to implement the Vienna Programme of Action. We especially look forward to increased regional economic cooperation. In this regard, additionally targeted support is furthermore essential to ensure the timely implementation of the Programme of Action, especially as we face the COVID-19 pandemic and its damaging social economic consequences. In conclusion, Mr. Chairman, my delegation is firmly convinced that your effective leadership will help us achieve meaningful progress on the Vienna Programme of Action and Sustainable Development Goals. You can count on my delegation's full cooperation, and we hope that our experience as an LLDC emerging from a situation of conflict will benefit other countries in similar situations. I thank you.
I thank Deputy Minister for his message. I now give the floor to His Excellency Mr. David Musabayana, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Relations of Zimbabwe.
Your Excellency, Honorable Ministers, ladies and gentlemen, I extend my sincere appreciation to Kazakhstan for convening this ministerial meeting in these unusual circumstances brought about by the COVID-19 pandemic. We appreciate the commitment of your government and the permanent mission of Kazakhstan in New York to keeping the priorities and aspirations of the LLDC group on the UN development agenda since the beginning of your tenure. Allow me to also thank and appreciate United Nations Secretary General Mr. Antonio Guterres for his solidarity and support for that group. We also note with appreciation the role played by Under-Secretary General and High Representative of LDCs, LLDCs, and SIDS, Madame Fekita Kamani and her team in promoting the cause of the LLDCs. Mr. Chairman, we are meeting at a critical juncture in the history of humankind as we celebrate 75 years of the founding of the United Nations. The year 2020 also coincides with the beginning of the decade of action and delivery on the Sustainable Development Goals. We are now also in the last 5 years of our implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action, which is an integral part of the 2030 agenda. In this regard, we commend the choice of the theme for this meeting, which is both timely and appropriate, as it reminds us of the urgent need to put all our efforts together to ensure that we achieve the ambitious goals we have set for ourselves to achieve a better life for all. LLDCs face several challenges arising from their remoteness, land blockedness, and geographical isolation. Among these are difficulties in connecting to global trade networks and the value chains. These constraints compound the cost of development while perpetuating poverty and economic distress in our countries. Addressing these specific challenges requires concrete action at all levels. In that regard, we are pleased that the pandemic has not deterred the UN system's efforts to address our request for a roadmap to achieve the goals set out in our blueprint, the Vienna Programme of Action. We welcome the roadmap to accelerate implementation of the VPOA and view it as a vital tool for further align the objectives of the Vienna Programme of Action with the Agenda 2030. Mr. Chairman, the government of Zimbabwe, under the able leadership of His Excellency President Idi Mnangagwa, continues to mainstream the 2030 Agenda and the VPOA international plans and programs. We are currently working on a 5-year national development strategy, which will run from 2021 to 2025 to bolster infrastructure projects crucial in attaining our national aspirations to attain an upper middle income status by 2030. This strategic plan will be followed by another 5-year national development strategy, whose aim will coincide with that of the 2030 agenda. We endeavor to develop all our nodes of connectivity, including air transport, roads, railways, and transmission lines, which are key to enhancing access to global markets. The COVID-19 pandemic has demonstrated that world-class ICT infrastructure is a necessity for every country. In this connection, I cannot overemphasize the importance of developing efficient, modern, and reliable infrastructure, including ICT and energy infrastructure. Zimbabwe has thus embarked on modernizing and expanding its strategic infrastructure as a key priority in our national plans and remains firm in its aim to reposition the country into a transport hub for the region. Mr. Chairman, as part of its efforts to overcome some of the challenges inherent in its status as a landlocked country, Zimbabwe inaugurated a dry port facility at Walvis Bay, Namibia, which will provide a strategic and cheaper gateway to the Atlantic Ocean for local exporters, importers, as well as international business entities. The infrastructure is expected to lead to more efficient access to the global supply chain, promote economic growth and development, and closer integration with other countries in Southern Africa. In the same vein, Zimbabwe is considering the construction of a railway line linking it to Namibia. Further to these initiatives, efforts are underway to establish 4 customs dry ports as a way to spur further economic activity. In the spirit of regional solidarity, together with transit and neighboring countries, we are working on the smooth implementation of the agreed legal frameworks, transit rules and policies, as well as transport and trade facilitation measures. The outbreak of COVID-19 has made this more pertinent as countries around have introduced stringent border controls that have negatively impacted on LLDCs, export earnings, as well as affecting supply chains. With the current downturn in the world trade expected to continue and to be particularly severe for LLDCs, it is now more urgent than ever that we do everything possible to ensure smooth transportation of goods to and from our countries. In times like these, digital technology becomes central to almost every aspect of our lives as we seek solutions to mitigate the impact of the pandemic. From vaccine research to online learning models, e-commerce, and tools that are enabling millions to work and study from home, the internet is providing a lifeline. However, this global shift assumes that all people have access to the internet. Unfortunately, this is not the case, with an estimated 3.6 billion people still not connected to the internet. The global health crisis requires that the international community urgently work together, closing this digital divide. Mr. Chairman and honorable ministers, in every crisis, there is a silver lining of opportunity. Let us therefore look at the pandemic as an opportunity to galvanize global action to make the world more connected and thus leave no one behind. Mr. Chairman, notwithstanding the efforts to sustain its economic development, Zimbabwe has its share of challenges like many other LLDCs. While government has put in place measures to address some of these challenges, regrettably, access to adequate financial resources on the international market has been severely restricted due to the high-risk profile of the country on account of unilateral sanctions imposed on the country by some Western countries. In the wake of glaring challenges brought about by COVID-19, the Secretary General has rightly called for the suspension of such measures, given their debilitating impact on the health and other sectors of targeted countries, and indeed on global efforts to fight the scourge and revamp the national as well as global economy. We must recall that COVID-19 is in our midst, impeding medical efforts in one country heightens the risk of all other countries. We therefore call upon the progressive world to join us in demanding the urgent and unconditional removal of these sanctions on all affected countries. Mr. Chairman, as I conclude, let me exhort you, my fellow LLDC countries, together with transit countries and our development partners, not to relent in our collective pursuit of a better world for all. In this regard, I join others in calling for increased cooperation and assistance towards the full implementation of the objectives contained in all 6 priority areas of the Vienna Programme of Action. These lofty goals call for us to prioritize unity and solidarity within our group in all our engagements. Let us therefore take full advantage of the 75th anniversary this year to set a daring and bold vision for a new decade to transform our world. I thank you.
I thank Deputy Minister for his intervention. Since connection was interrupted, now we'll proceed with the recorded message of His Excellency Mr. Zohrab Matsakanyan, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Armenia.
Thank you, Minister Tleuberdi, and thank you for Kazakhstan's leadership as chair of the group of the Landlocked Developing Countries at the United Nations, and for your commitment to this very important agenda. I'm deeply grateful to His Excellency Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Antonio Guterres, for his continued support and attention to the needs of the landlocked developing nations. In these challenging times for humanity, messages of hope, trust, and solidarity are indispensable to steering collective action in response to the unprecedented challenges we're facing. Our profound gratitude also goes to Undersecretary General Fekitemola Utukumano and her office for their important contribution to the work of the group. I'm pleased to join today's conversation as we gather virtually to take stock of the progress and challenges in the implementation of the collective commitments under the Vienna Programme of Action. 6 years into its adoption, the VPOA stands as a blueprint for cooperation between the LLDCs, transit countries, and the development partners, and continues to call for accelerated action relevant as ever. While the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic have affected virtually every corner of our world, countries in special situations who are most sensitive to global shocks are particularly prone to disproportionate setbacks and consequences of the fallout caused by the pandemic. The landlocked developing countries whose developmental aspirations are already adversely affected by the structural constraints, including the lack of territorial access to the sea, geographic remoteness and isolation from global markets, and who, more often than not, have to rely on their transit neighbors for seaborne trade, have become particularly vulnerable to the disruptive impacts of the ongoing crisis. Following the global lockdown measures, the landlocked developing countries have been facing even more constraints to their sustainable and inclusive growth and continue to be affected in unique ways. One crucial and pressing priority before the United Nations and its development system is therefore to urgently unlock the LLDCs and their trade and productive capacities by way of stepping up efforts to deliver on the key pledge of the VPOA of integrating the LLDCs into the global markets. The launch of the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA is an essential step in accelerating concerted engagement of the international community in assisting the LLDCs to mitigate the negative impacts of the pandemic through comprehensive and inclusive recovery efforts and supporting the LLDCs in getting back on track towards the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals. It will be important to give proper consideration to the implementation of these crucial commitments through consistent monitoring and review, with tangible benchmarks for assessing due progress. Such a follow-up and reporting framework should involve multiple stakeholders, including the transit countries. This is a process that requires full and unconditional commitment by all actors. Mr. Chair, in this year of global turbulence, major grievances, anxieties, and fears, the international community has a historic opportunity to lay the groundwork for meaningful change and to build back better. The risks posed by the COVID-19 have demonstrated that for the response and recovery efforts to be effective, they need to focus on tackling inequalities, discrimination, and lack of inclusion. Otherwise, the gaps are likely to remain and increase. It is important that, together with the disruption caused by the pandemic, we'll also look at the pre-existing barriers to development, blockades, and unilateral coercive measures which are detrimental to sustainable development and inconsistent with the response and recovery efforts. They undermine not only regional development, but peace and security. For 3 decades, Turkey has been denying the right of Armenia to access to and from sea by closing its land borders. This hostile siege cannot be justified either by common sense or by international law, as it directly violates not only relevant international conventions, customary law, but also international agreements. Armenia is fully committed to effective multilateral cooperation for development at the global, international, and regional levels. We continue to view inclusive cooperation between the landlocked and transit countries as an essential prerequisite to removing political barriers for the free movement of people, goods, and services, and for the effective realization of the economic and social rights and rights of all peoples. The promotion of all human rights and fundamental freedoms, gender equality and inclusion, as well as consolidation of democratic values are key to priorities for Armenia, predicated on the idea that human rights are universal for all peoples and individuals in all parts of the world, regardless of geography or status. Ensuring human rights-based and people-centered approach remains an ultimate priority for the response and recovery efforts to which Armenia is fully committed. Investing in people and embracing the national talent as the driver of smart development defines the nature of Armenia's reform and recovery agenda, with particular emphasis on information and communication technologies, fostering innovation and development of the ICT sector, which is prioritized as an essential tool to lower costs and facilities access to foreign markets, thus contributing to increase of foreign trade. In conclusion, Mr. Chair, Armenia remains fully committed to effective multilateral cooperation in support of the 6 priority areas of the Vienna Programme of Action and the roadmap for accelerating implementation of the VPOA. We look forward to working with all our partners to achieve progress in these critical times.
I thank Minister for his intervention, and now I give the floor to Her Excellency Dr. Karen Longarik, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Bolivia, who will deliver a pre-recorded message.
Mr. Secretary General Antonio Guterres, High Representative of the Landlocked Developed Countries, Mr. Chair of the Landlocked Development Countries, Mr. Mukhtar Teluberi, distinguished ministers and representative. It is a privilege to be addressing you in the context of the annual ministerial meeting of the Landlocked Developing Countries, which is taking place in the context of the 75th anniversary of the United Nations. These are complex times and they are unprecedented for the world and for my country. The pandemic has impacted us in many aspects, highlighting the fragility and vulnerability of healthcare systems as well as of the economy. In this scenario, economic recovery will be both gradual and laborious. Bolivia is concerned about the economic and social effects of COVID-19, which will persist and which will go well beyond this healthcare crisis and which will impact landlocked developing countries even more, as well as small island developing states. The midterm review of the Vienna Programme of Action showed that progress was achieved, but it was not sufficient. There is still a lag behind other countries, and for this reason, Bolivia would like to thank the Secretariat and the chair of the group for the initiative of the roadmap that we are now adopting. Distinguished ministers, like your countries, Bolivia is aware that it will need to improve both infrastructure and connectivity with the world, and in this way reduce logistic and transportation costs, which will then allow for greater activity and strengthen trade and the economy in the benefit of the most vulnerable sectors, such as women, small and medium-sized enterprises. Along these lines, we have begun implementation of the National Program for Job Reactivation with a view to protecting current jobs and promoting the creation of new sources of work. In the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, we are currently implementing diplomatic trade to reactivate the economy, and we are prioritizing foreign trade, the promotion of exports, and attraction of investments. Landlocked developing countries need to intensify action for the development production chains with an international vision in mind. This is necessary not just because of the current COVID situation, but also because of the adversity that we must face in being landlocked countries. These adversities are structural in nature, and recovering our economies is thus more complex. And for this reason, we must pay special attention to allocation of extraordinary resources for our countries, in addition to a new program for external debt alleviation. We also need to increase ODAs without replacing bilateral cooperation channels, and we also need to implement programs for physical and digital investment in infrastructure. And we need to include the LLDCs in the area of facilitation and simplification of trade. And for this reason, we need to bolster and we need solid and strong partnerships that highlight the importance of promoting cooperation with LLDCs, transit countries, and developed countries, all with synergies between public and private sectors, with sub-regional bodies, and with bilateral coordination, including border agencies. Finally, I must indicate that in the spirit of good neighborliness, in the case of Bolivia, it is possible to achieve a solution to our geographic enclosed situation through significant negotiations based on the fact that there are many multilateral resolutions that have recognized the fact that a solution to the country's landlocked state is possible. And thus, we will continue in the meantime to be deprived of our sovereign access to the Pacific Ocean, and will resort to all existing mechanisms to address the obstacles of our ocean access. For this reason, we will use the instruments provided by multilateralism, integration, and cooperation, which provide us with opportunities to legitimately alleviate our economic development longing. Thank you.
For your intervention. Now I give the floor to Dr. Abdul Hakim Al-Waer, advisor to the President of Islamic Development Bank.
Your Excellency, Mr. Mukhtar Tulberidi, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Global Chair of the Group of LLDCs, Honorable Ministers of Foreign Affairs and Heads of International Organizations, ladies and gentlemen. Allow me, Excellencies, to deliver the statement of His Excellency Dr. Bandar Hajjar, the President of the Islamic Development Bank, on his behalf. It is my great pleasure and honor to participate in the annual meeting of the Foreign Affairs of the Landlocked Developing Countries with you today. The Islamic Development Bank has 12 member countries in the LLDC group, representing more than a third of the whole group in terms of country membership, as well as in terms of the country membership, and also has 7 of these member countries are in Asia and 5 are in the sub-Saharan Africa. The Islamic Development Bank is a naturally created South-South cooperation development institution in 57 member countries, all from the South region. As highlighted in the Islamic Development Bank 10-year strategy, President 5-year program, and our recently approved regional cooperation and integration strategy, the promotion of regional connectivity and member countries' integration into global markets is among the ISDB group's strategic priorities. In this regard, ISDB's holistic making markets work for development model is strategically relevant to the landlocked economies as well as their neighboring economies, including non-ISDB member countries. The ISDB's approach to promote the regional connectivity has 2 interlinked and mutually supportive elements. The first is the development of inter-country corridors, while the second is aligning physical connectivity with soft aspects of regional integration. Regarding the hard infrastructure connectivity, priority is given to the connection of landlocked economies to international ports and trade networks. These priorities are set out harmony with the existing regional cooperation programs such as CAREC for Central Asia. Just to give a few concrete project examples, ISDB has approved and implemented $454 million for completion of the missing links along the Trans-Saharan Road Corridor in Africa, and USD $371 million for the Kazakhstan-Turkmenistan-Iran Railway Corridor, connecting landlocked Central Asia country with the Middle East region. Regarding the soft infrastructure aspects, ISDB is completing the commercialization studies on the above projects to promote trade and reduce transportation costs. Within this context, the COVID-19 crisis is now reshaping these needs in many ways and adding complexity to the already existing challenges of landlocked countries. Recognizing these emerging challenges, ISDB has acted swiftly to support its member countries by approving a USD $2.3 billion Strategic Preparedness and Response Program. The program takes a holistic 3-track approach, which we call the 3 Rs: response, restore, and restart. These are designed to assist member countries' efforts in preventing, containing, mitigating, and recovering from the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. An important lesson we can learn from the COVID-19 crisis is that the current challenges are beyond the capacity of any one country. Cooperation and solidarity among the countries is the only way to deal collectively with these challenges. Multilateral cooperation can help us take advantage of the existing opportunities and guard against vulnerabilities. Under the overall umbrella of the SDGs, ISDB is committed to continue in supporting the LLDCs in line with the priorities set out in the Vienna Programme of Action to focus our joint efforts. With these comments, I wish the meeting a great success and look forward for fruitful deliberations. I thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
I thank Dr. Al-Wair for his intervention. Now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Tong Phan Savanthet, Deputy Minister of Foreign Affairs of Laos, who will deliver a pre-recorded message.
Mr. Chair, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to express my sincere thanks and appreciation to you, Mr. Chair, and your team for the able chairmanship in guiding the work of our group, especially during this time of global pandemic. My delegation shares the view that the COVID-19 pandemic has triggered unprecedented socio-economic impacts worldwide. especially on the most vulnerable countries like LLDCs, by hindering the LLDCs integration into global economy, as well as reversing the progress made thus far on Vienna Programme of Action and SDGs implementation. Moreover, as a result of stringent lockdown measures applied globally, coupled with the projected decline in global output, and LDCs are facing even greater challenges given the lack of territorial access to the sea, remoteness from international markets, and heavy reliance on transit countries. In this regard, my delegation would also like to call on development partners, transit countries, UN system, regional and international organizations, and private sectors, among others, to take necessary actions for immediate response, midterm recovery, and long-term strategic measures as outlined in the LLDC statement, and call for actions on COVID-19, which will be crucial to safeguard the progress made over the years and to accelerate the VPOA implementation in this decade of action and delivery for sustainable development. Mr. Chair, at the national level, the Lao government has attached great importance to the implementation of the VPOA. Therefore, priority areas contained therein have been incorporated in our national development plan and strategy, especially in the areas of infrastructure, trade facilitation, and transport system, with a view to transform our country from a landlocked into a landlinked one, aiming to become a inland transit route and logistic hub. Toward this end, considerable progress has been made as reflected in our midterm report, particularly in the areas of development and improvement of infrastructure and economic corridors. For instance, the construction of highways, bridges, and railways connecting the country with its neighboring countries, as well as the development of dry ports and logistic parks, of which the Lao PDR became a party of the 2013 Intergovernmental Agreement on Dry Port last year. Despite the progress made, the Lao PDR continues to encounter numerous challenges in its VPOA implementation, such as financial constraints, logistic costs, logistic capabilities, business promotion, and technology. Additionally, the country also has been facing other challenges related to the impact of climate change, particularly heavy rains have caused several severe floods, landslides, and roads and highways damages. With COVID-19 pandemic, the country is encountering even more obstacles as economic and social sectors have borne the brunt from a sharp decline in tourism, investment, and trade activities, resulting in revenue losses, unemployment increase, among others. Therefore, the considerable amount of resources is needed for recovery, and we need to address the matter in a more holistic, strategic, and long-term approaches of linkages between infrastructure development, climate resilience and adaptation, trade facilitation, and economic stimulated packages. Mr. Chair, in conclusion, I wish to call upon the international community to honor their commitment to the full, effective, and timely implementation of the VPOA, as stated in the political declaration of the comprehensive high-level midterm review of the implementation of the VPOA, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly on 5th of December 2019. On our part, we reaffirm our strong commitment to working closely with on-transit countries, development partners, the UN system, and private sector to accelerate the implementation of the VPOA for the remaining 5 years. On this note, the Lao PDR is appreciative of the continued support and assistance extended to us by all partners and international community in order to overcome this challenging time and win back better. I thank you.
I thank Deputy Minister for his message. Now we have a recorded message of His Excellency Mr. Feridun Sirinlioglu, Permanent Representative of Turkey to the UN.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I am pleased to be with you today. I would like to begin by congratulating Kazakhstan for taking over the chairmanship of the group of landlocked developing countries and thank Paraguay for their commendable leadership. The world has been utterly shaken by a global health crisis since our last meeting in September. The pandemic has triggered an economic downturn with acute repercussions on the functioning of open markets and global supply chains. Unfortunately, as many developing countries, LLDCs have also been severely hit by this crisis. Their geographical disadvantages, coupled with interruptions in cross-border transport networks, caused wide disruptions on their access to essential goods, including food and vital medical supplies. As a transit and a donor country, Turkey has taken every measure to ensure that no one is left behind in implementing an effective COVID-19 response plan. We removed customs tariffs on essential medical equipment, including masks, ventilators, and respiratory devices from certain countries to ensure the continuity of supply chains. We granted exemption from COVID-19 related restrictions to road vehicles and cargo planes traveling in and out of Turkey to guarantee uninterrupted flow of food and medical supplies. To date, we have responded to medical equipment needs of more than 140 countries and 7 international organizations, and we will continue to work with our partners to help others cope with the adverse effects of COVID-19. Excellencies, this year marks the beginning of the decade of action to implement the Sustainable Development Agenda. However, the current international economic system remains far from addressing the vulnerabilities of LLDCs. The existing architecture for international cooperation is insufficient to offer a large-scale and coordinated response to their challenges, including the current pandemic. We need to increase our efforts to strengthen the integration of LLDCs into the global trading system and foster a rules-based international economic and trade environment for their sustainable recovery. In this vein, Turkey supports the related G20 and IMF initiatives, including the debt service payment suspension. Such measures have been instrumental in those countries in creating more fiscal space to focus on the immediate health response. We closely follow the Secretary General's Financing for Development initiative and support the discussions around improving the capacity building of LLDCs in terms of allocation of resources and utilization of innovative financing models. There remains more to be done on these issues at the IMF, the World Bank, the G20, as well as the UN. Excellencies, unfortunately, the weak production capacities still overshadow LLDC's prospects for inclusive growth and sustainable development. Diagnostic tests and basic equipment are still lacking to fight against the spread of the virus and ensure effective medical responses. The provision of affordable and rapid supply of vaccines and antiviral drugs is urgently needed. The UN Technology Bank in Turkey, together with the World Health Organization, UNDP, and UNCTAD, launched the Tech Access Partnership initiative to increase local production of essential medical technologies in developing countries. The initiative brings together innovators, manufacturers, and the academia with local manufacturers in developing countries to share data, knowledge, and other necessary support. Furthermore, opening of the World Health Organization geographically dispersed office for preparedness for humanitarian and health emergencies in Istanbul early this month will support global efforts to effectively respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Dear friends, we need to make sure to align our response and recovery efforts with the Sustainable Development Agenda and accelerate the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action. LLDC's failure to attain sustainable development goals will have global implications. Turkey will continue its efforts to keep the vulnerable groups and countries in special circumstances, including the LLDCs, high on our agenda especially in these trying times. Thank you.
I thank His Excellency for the message. And now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Vasily Nebenzia, Permanent Representative of Russia to the UN.
Distinguished Minister, distinguished participants, today's meeting of Ministers of Foreign Affairs of landlocked developing countries is taking place in a difficult context. The widespread closure of borders in the first months of the COVID-19 pandemic and the subsequent restrictions have further worsened their situations and made their integration into global economic links even more difficult. We support comprehensive and timely efforts in order to implement the Vienna Programme of Action in a timely manner. Most LLDCs are in dire need of support from the donor community as well as foreign investors in order to create and modernize their transportation and energy infrastructures and implement the latest ICT technologies. In the area of trade and commerce, LLDCs that are not members of WTO but in the process of joining the organizations are to be benefiting from a specialized and differentiated regime as well as simplified trade procedures. Another element that is important is adapting the legislation of developing countries, including LLDCs, to the requirements of the WTO trade facilitation agreements. The tasks before the LLDCs are not something that we view as an abstract concept. Given our geographical position and historical links, Russia is part of complex Eurasian integration networks that include countries of Central Asia. Assistance to these countries is a focus in our general program of packages for providing assistance. Without this, we cannot attain the ambitious goal of creating a unified Eurasian space, as well as creating transport and corridors linking our various regions. Through the Eurasian Economic Community, we have already made significant progress in terms of free circulation of services, goods, and citizens. We are continuing to work in this direction in order to minimize barriers that prevent trade and supply chains, as well as to ensure unimpeded access and transit through the countries of the Union. We would like to underscore our commitment to the decisions so important to LLDCs of the G20 meeting that took place on September 3rd, namely the need to coordinate the opening of borders and take further measures for economic developments while complying with necessary precautionary measures. In that connection, the initiative to set up green trade corridors that would be free of sanctions would allow to quickly ensure recovery and harness the country's economic capacity in order to attain further openness and cooperation. We must prevent unscrupulous competition, unjustified barriers to trade, and ensure that vulnerable economies have access to international financial institutions and instruments. We trust on the solidarity of all the members of today's meetings. Thank you.
For the intervention, and now I give the floor to Her Excellency Ms. Mami Mitsutori, Assistant Secretary General and Special Representative of the Secretary General for Disaster Risk Reduction.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Mr. Mukhtar Tiliberdi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Kazakhstan and Global Chair of the Group of Landlocked Developing Countries. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, all protocols observed. At the outset, and the Vienna Programme of Action, disaster risk reduction must be at the core of policies and investments for structural economic transformation and resilient infrastructure in landlocked developing countries. Sendai Framework for Disaster Risk Reduction provides governments with a policy blueprint to reduce disaster risk and build resilient economies and societies. In this regard, we are much encouraged with the strong synergies established between the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and the Sendai framework in the political declaration of the midterm review of the former. It is crucially important for LLDCs to develop national disaster risk reduction strategies that are fully aligned with the Sendai framework, as DRR strategies can facilitate a transboundary approach to ensure the resilience of transit, communications, and trade networks between LLDCs and their neighboring countries. I would like to make a call to all countries to apply the Sendai framework, and in particular its core provision of building back better in establishing and implementing COVID-19 socioeconomic recovery policies and investments. The application of the Sendai framework can facilitate a resilient recovery informed by current and emerging risks, including pandemics and climate risks, and address underlying socioeconomic drivers of disaster risk to prevent future disasters. The UN Office for Disaster Risk Reduction is actively contributing to the implementation of activities included in the UN Roadmap for Accelerated Implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action in collaboration with UN partners. For example, in 5 Central Asian countries, we are developing national disaster risk reduction strategies and collecting disaster risk and loss data to guide resilient and risk-informed future investments, a project funded by the European Union. Another example is 56 cities in African LLDCs participating in the Making City Resilient campaign led by UNDRR to build resilience at the local level. Excellencies, I would like to close by reiterating our commitment to continue building the resilience of LLDCs with UN partners and all other stakeholders in order to face the current challenging situation with COVID-19 for the duration of the decade of action and beyond. Thank you very much.
I thank Assistant Secretary General for your remarks. As we are running out of time and I still have a long list of speakers, may I propose to give the floor only to the remaining 4 delegations of the group of LLDC, and other speakers may send remarks to us and we will reflect it at the OHRLS website, as well as in the summary report of the meeting, which will be then circulated among the participants. So allow me give the floor first to His Excellency Mr. Eric Yemdaogo Tiare, Permanent Representative of Burkina Faso to the UN.
Mr. Chair, Mr. President of the Secretary General Assembly, Mr. Secretary General, Under Secretary General, Mr. Chair, at the outset, I would like to convey the brotherly greetings of Burkina Faso, and our head of state was unable to attend, but I would like to, on his behalf, address his remarks in this difficult time and congratulate you on the quality of the leadership of this group. I would also like to congratulate the Secretary General of the United Nations for his excellent report on the implementation of the VPOA. I also would like to welcome and thank the team of the Under-Secretary General. Sir, our meeting, which is taking place under the theme Partnering for Accelerated Implementation of the VPOA, is taking place after last December's holding of the midterm review. Burkina Faso closely followed the process of reviewing the program, and we would like to congratulate the USG and her team for the very wonderful work that they have carried out. While this review helped us to see the important strides made on development under the program, it also showed the many challenges that we still have to take up, as well as the new priorities linked to COVID-19. We have to look at women and girls, gender equality, and other issues. And there, just a few days ago, our government declared a natural disaster following the floods that took place that led to huge losses of life and property. And given the many challenges of landlockedness, we're also undergoing the effects of climate change, and we're also facing a security and humanitarian crisis without precedent. And in addition to that, we now have the health crisis caused by COVID-19, the effects of which have impacted all areas of our society. We were already vulnerable and we were lacking resources, so we undertook initiatives and redoubled our efforts to find resources to strengthen our economy, but the effect was such that alone we cannot achieve these objectives, and we therefore need the support of our partners because of terrorism and COVID-19, which are serious threats to our bid to achieve sustainable development. And all of this is part of the review of the program, and we're trying to expand our partners to find new partners for new synergies. And this is a very timely meeting, and we can only hope that we will see new results of these partnerships. There is therefore no doubt that if all these strategies are implemented, they can leverage and catalyze the achievement of the SDGs. Burkina Faso welcomes the debt alleviation and the initiatives on behalf of landlocked developing countries and all the efforts of our partners to help us. In conclusion, we must ensure that the political declaration and the roadmap that we will adopt will be the instruments that will drive the future actions to achieve sustainable development for LLDCs. Thank you.
For the intervention, and now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Enkbold Vorshilov, to the UN.
Chairman, Excellencies, distinguished delegates, it's a great pleasure for me and my delegation to participate in the annual meeting of foreign ministers of landlocked developing countries. I wish to convey my sincere gratitude to His Excellency Mukhtar Teleberdi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Republic of Kazakhstan, for his excellent leadership as a chair of the group of LLDCs. I would also like to express my government's appreciation to the UN Under-Secretary General and High Representative for LDC, LLDC, and SIDS, Madame Utaikamanu, and her office for the continued support extended to our group. Mr. Chairman, the Ministerial Gathering is a significant platform to review and assess the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action to identify innovative and flexible way forward to deepen the cooperation with our partners and strengthen our group's unity and solidarity. Today's meeting is being convened at an unprecedented time when we all continue to contain and prevent the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic that exposed the vulnerabilities and inequalities within and among our societies even more explicitly. We realize that our first task is a decade of action and delivery to accelerate implementation of the SDGs is to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic and build back better. There is no doubt that we can do through comprehensive cooperation and effective partnership. To this end, the efficient approach towards mobilizing sources of financing, sharing knowledge, innovation and technology, and improving access to markets are necessary and urgent for LLDCs to keep the progress achieved so far and respond to addressing the impact of the pandemic and beyond. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to briefly touch upon the Mongolia's contribution to the SDGs implementation in the COVID-19 context. The principle of SDGs, leaving no one leaving no one behind is a key directive in our countering the COVID-19 pandemic. My government has introduced economic stimulus packages amounting up to 5% of the GDP and taken the proactive measures through implementing comprehensive plan for tackling the multifaceted impact of this mega crisis, as ensuring an employment-led and people-centered recovery. More recovery policy and measures on the overcoming the challenges caused by the pandemic have been reflected in the Mongolian government's action plan for 2020 and 2024. As a result of these timely actions, Mongolia has so far zero local transmission of COVID-19 and no pandemic-related deaths. Mr. Chairman, we have witnessed that countries with special needs face persistent challenges that hamper their efforts in achieving the SDGs. Thus, Mongolia fully supports the Chair's efforts to build closer collaboration to secure and promote the shared interests of the LLDCs, SIDS, especially within the intergovernmental negotiation process. We also welcome UN roadmap for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action at the international level in the remaining 5 years that highlights priority areas with practical deliverables towards achieving the objective of the dedicated program. Scientific knowledge and effective research studies, evidence-based advisory service, and analytical tools are imperative to overcome the challenge faced by the LLDCs. Hence, I would like to underscore the important role of International Think Tank for LLDCs and its contribution in achieving sustainable development in the landlocked developing countries. Taking this opportunity, I invite the member states, development partners, and relevant stakeholders to provide the think tank with adequate support and contribution for enabling this organization to do more for LLDCs. In conclusion, may I reiterate our continuous support to work of the group of landlocked countries. Also, I wish the annual meeting of foreign ministers of LLDCs a full success. I thank you.
I thank His Excellency for the intervention, and now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Abdou Abari, Permanent Representative of Niger to the UN.
Monsieur le Président,
Distinguished Chairman, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, our meeting is taking place at a moment when the COVID-19 pandemic is forcing us to reconsider our strategies and choices because its impacts, not only the health impacts of the pandemic and others, are affecting areas of governance. This is particularly important for LLDCs. The Vienna Programme of Action seeks to improve the economic growth rates of these countries, as well as spur the development of their transit and trade systems and facilitate trade. As you know, the roadmap adopted by the 32 countries of our group is the framework for this, and it proposed a comprehensive approach to improve the integration of LLDCs into the global economy through a number of action vectors and addressing fundamental policy issues when it comes to infrastructure, transport, international trade, and facilitating trade, as well as deepening regional cooperation and structural transformation of the economy. Thus, 6 years after the implementation of the VPOA roadmap, we are seeing mixed results among LLDCs, and the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic could further hinder progress along this path. Even before the pandemic, the progress that was seen was insufficient to allow LLDCs to progress efficiently towards implementing the 2030 SDGs. As the participation of these countries in the global economy and their exports remain extremely low and limited to a very limited number of areas. In this dim context, we can nonetheless note that LLDCs are increasingly participating in regional trade agreements and economic blocs, which is improving their prospects for integration into the global economy. Thus, the African Free Trade Area provides a major opportunity for the integration of African LLDCs, such as Niger, into Africa's economy. It should be noted in this context that 15 LLDCs are in Africa. Africa is seeing demographic growth that could be transformed into economic dividends in order to educate, train our youth, and create jobs. We have a large number of young Africans arriving on the labor market every year. It is only through implementing the 2030 Agenda and the various related plans and programs that will allow us to achieve our goals. The VPOA is not something isolated. It is integrated with various other African plans and programs seeking to strengthen regional integration and spur the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. However, this has been hindered by the negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemics, as well as the preventative measures, such as closing of borders, isolation, and obstacles to access to markets. This has led to a global economic recession and is slowing the progress of LLDCs towards the 2030 goals. LLDCs had already been facing a number of challenges, render them vulnerable, for example, non-favorable trade rules that do not protect them from external shocks and that do not support their efforts to diversify in order to eradicate poverty. These negative impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic have, of course, not spared developed countries as well. Niger faces additional challenges such as combating terrorism. However, we are already implementing a recovery program based on improving transport and communication infrastructure, and this is helping us build a modern economic system. It is regrettable that the growth rates we'd hoped to attain had been hampered by that pandemic. For example, at ECOWAS, the projected growth rate for 2020 will be more than 1% lower if the pandemic continues to the end of the year. And this will also lead to a decrease in tax revenues and an increase in unemployment. To conclude, Mr. Chairman, I would like to express Niger's full support for the ministerial declaration that we are to adopt to date. As we are in the last 4 years of the VPOA, we hope that its implementation will allow all the countries in our group to make the necessary progress towards implementing the 2030 goals. I thank you for your attention.
I thank His Excellency for his intervention, and now I give the floor to His Excellency Mr. Bakhtiyar Ibrahimov, Permanent Representative of Uzbekistan to the UN.
Your Excellency Mukhtar Tiliberdi, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Kazakhstan, Your Excellency Katoa Utai Kamanau, Under Secretary General, distinguished participant. First of all, let me commend Kazakhstan for convening today's annual ministerial meeting on partnering for accelerated implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action and achieving sustainable development in LLDCs in the era of COVID-19. I would like also to thank all previous distinguished speakers for their informative and meaningful presentations. Mr. Chair, since the adoption of the Vienna Programme of Action, Uzbekistan has been taking coherent steps for its smooth implementation. Herein, special attention has been paid to promoting multilateralism by furthering regional cooperation, which is one of the important prerequisites for achieving targets identified in the Vienna Programme of Action and overall in the SDGs. Such cooperation acquires special significance today when the entire international community tries to tackle the outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic. Since the outbreak of the current pandemic, In Uzbekistan, we've been focusing all of our efforts and resources on the following directions: containing the spread of this dangerous virus by setting up special financial fund, rendering assistance to neighboring countries in fighting coronavirus by providing them with needed medical equipment and supplies, foodstuffs, and other products of first necessity, expanding collaboration with the United Nations and its specialized agencies in mitigating the negative consequences of COVID-19. In Uzbekistan, we support the notion that no one is safe until everybody is safe. Mr. Chair, as far as VPOA is concerned, the Central Asian countries for the past 4 years, thanks to the joint efforts, have created a fundamentally new political environment in the region, raised the political level of trust, strengthened traditionally friendly and good neighborly relations among themselves that allow to significantly expand multifaceted cooperation in the region. In advancing such collaboration, important role play regular consultative meetings of the head of state of Central Asian countries. Convening such meeting was initiated by the President of the Republic of Uzbekistan, His Excellency Shavkat Mirziyoyev. Up to now, 2 meetings in this format have been held, one in Nur-Sultan and the second one in Tashkent. The third one is slated for this year in Kyrgyzstan. In Uzbekistan, we identified the following prospective areas for deepening regional cooperation, which are fully aligned with the Vienna Programme of Action for landlocked developing countries. First, expanding cooperation in transport communication areas. Here, especially important is given to the diversifying the transport network in the region as an important driver for regional development. Second, holding regular meetings on various levels to discuss issues pertaining to advancing regional collaboration in trade, economic, investment, and energy areas. Third, jointly addressing ecological and water issues in Central Asia. Concluding, Mr. Chair, I would like to emphasize that Uzbekistan remains committed to continue close cooperation with the United Nations, its specialized agencies, neighboring states, and other stakeholders in the implementation of the Vienna Programme of Action for LLDCs and SDGs as a whole. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I thank His Excellency for the intervention. And following the agenda, allow me now move to the item 4. We will start with the consideration and adoption of the Ministerial Declaration. The members of LDC group, under the guidance of the Chair, have prepared and negotiated the Ministerial Declaration, which has been circulated to you. I now invite the members of the group of the LLDC to adopt the declaration. I hear no objections. Then the Ministerial Declaration is adopted. We now move on the consideration and adoption of the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA. The draft roadmap was presented to member states in July 2020 during the high-level political forum. The final draft has been circulated to all member states, and I hope you had the opportunity to examine the document. Let me highlight that the roadmap is a living document and will be regularly updated by inclusion of new projects and inviting other interested stakeholders to participate. I therefore wish to invite the members of the group to adopt the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA in the remaining 5 years. So, if no objections, the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA is therefore adopted. Before moving to the next agenda item, I would like to give the floor for any comments regarding adoption of the Ministerial Declaration and roadmap. I do not see any request for the floor. Now we move on to agenda item 5. Any other matters? Thus, I invite any delegation with any matters for consideration by this meeting under this item to indicate in the chat. As I understand, the delegation of Armenia requesting for the floor. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Mr. Minister. I would like to first thank you for holding this ministerial meeting today, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of many New York-based colleagues in commending the chairmanship of Kazakhstan and the leadership of our colleague, Ambassador Kayprat Umarov, in steering the activities of the group. I'm taking the floor to make a brief comment on the adoption of the ministerial declaration, which I think can be helpful for our collective reflections on the work of the group and the way forward. I'm compelled to express strongest concern about the ways in which one delegation demonstrated a most distasteful and dysfunctional pattern of thought and behavior in course of negotiations on the text, holding hostage the inclusion of such important elements in the text of draft declaration as provisions on negative impact of unilateral coercive measures and references to necessity of maintaining transit freight transportation for the countries in disadvantaged geographical situation. Azerbaijan's complete inability to positively engage and contribute constructively in deliberations without irrelevant, highly demagogical narratives is detrimental to the interests of the landlocked developing countries and the agenda that the group stands for. The inflammatory rhetoric we heard today from the foreign minister of that country must be acknowledged for what it is: domestically driven propaganda and nothing short of instigation of hatred. This was an irresponsible, unhelpful distraction in complete disregard of the core interests of the group. I think we need to formulate better rules of engagement for the membership of the group so as to make sure that a single country is strictly restrained from hijacking the important collective agenda in front of us. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Next, I give the floor to the delegation of Azerbaijan. Delegation of Azerbaijan. It seems there are some technical issues with the connection. Then may I ask delegation of Azerbaijan to send your remarks to us, and then we will take the note of your intervention and circulate among the participants. So now, Excellencies and distinguished delegates, we now move to the conclusion of the meeting. We have adopted the declaration which notes with the concern the remaining major gaps and challenges that need to be addressed to achieve the VPOA objectives and SDGs. The declaration reiterates our commitments to the accelerated implementation of the VPOA and calls upon all relevant stakeholders to further strengthen their efforts in the remaining 5 years and the 2030 agenda for sustainable development. It's in this vein, as I have underscored it in my opening remarks, that UNOHLLS, in consultations with the more than 40 UN system agencies and relevant international and regional organizations, developed the roadmap for accelerated implementation of the VPOA. Thus, the roadmap is the framework for enhanced cooperation and partnership and represents a strategic commitment of the UN system, other international and regional organizations with concrete activities and deliverables. As the chair of the group, I am confident that the comprehensive nature of the roadmap, including the concrete initiative and deliverables from the different organizations, represents the collective support of the UN system towards the development of the LLDCs. To this end, I express my deep belief in the multilateral efforts of all stakeholders to raise the LLDC profile even higher in the international agenda, especially under the COVID-19 pandemic. And the delegation not connected. Then allow me to state that the meeting is now adjourned. Thank you.